Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube today talking all things Week 16. Sam previewing every single game.
We are, absolutely. Let's do it. Hey, you're still, I see, live from the basement with the Christmas tree. It's beautiful. Loving it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Festivities. We'll see if my dad's made a few appearances on the show through the years. We'll see if he's back in time to maybe make a late pick or something. We'll see. I don't know if we'll be home in time. But, yeah, excited to, be back in Massachusetts for a little bit, celebrating with the family. But we got some business to attend to, Sam. It's a full slate, 16 games, which I'll start on Saturday. It's all brought to you by PrizePicks. We got Sam's PrizePicks lineup yesterday. Mine will be unveiled later today. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code Check the Mic to get $50 instantly when you play $5. Also gave out some merch yesterday. If you want to purchase some merch, links in the description. Had some great giveaways yesterday on the show. Based off of some obscure NFL stats, so that was nice to be able to give back during the holiday season here, Sam.
Yeah, hopefully my merch will be arriving at my house sometime soon, and I'll be able to display it live on the show.
Yeah, no better selling point than
advertisement than this right here. No better.
I love it. All right, man, you ready to get into it?
Yeah. You want the Survivor League updates or the
Sleeper I don't
League
really
updates?
Want the update. But if you want to give it.
Yeah, I do. So the Survivor Pool, remember, we've got these 2 leagues running all season long. You can get access to those leagues in our Discord. You can get the link to the Discord in the description of this show. The first one is a Survivor Pool. The same people are alive as last week. It's basically as you were. 2 people still alive all season long. 2 more, I think, that have been there that joined later on. That's been kind of as it was for a few weeks. The more interesting thing is the Pick'em League, where somebody named El Chobo is first, now all alone on 131 wins. They've picked up a couple of wins in terms of lead. I dropped games but stay in 4th overall, so I've got 128 wins, 3 back from the lead. Steve, you had an ugly week, and you are now languishing down with just 106 wins, which puts you 6 wins behind Harry Palazzolo, your child.
Yeah, he's had a good couple weeks. He's letting me know it.
Yeah, he had a great week last week. You had a bad week, and now you're 6 games behind the child.
Running out of time to catch up here. 3 more regular season weeks than the playoffs. So, yeah, we got to make some good picks today.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to have to – are you going to play contrarian just to get the games back on the – what is he, 9?
Yeah, he's 9. Yeah, well, yeah, might need to here. Might need to. So – We'll see how we strategize this. Yeah, we'll go. I'll let you know as we go.
All right.
Don't love it. Don't love where I'm at. All right, but let's go. Let's go through the games here. We're going to start Saturday at 4:30. Pittsburgh Steelers at the Baltimore Ravens. Steelers get to win the division here with the win. They have the AFC North on the line. One of the surprises of the NFL season, to be honest, especially with the Ravens having their best regular season record in the NFL last year. Baltimore still favored by 6.5, though. Pittsburgh won the last matchup in Pittsburgh, but again, you're 9-5 Ravens against the 10-4 Steelers with the AFC North on the line Saturday at 4:30.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? The Pittsburgh won the last game, and the Ravens are still heavy favorites, despite not playing necessarily their best football in the last month. Okay, they've had games where they look great, obviously against the Giants, but they haven't looked all conquering. I mean, that's kind of a weird one, no?
It is. I mean, especially given the way Pittsburgh played against Baltimore. I think on one hand, last time around, you have Chris Boswell hitting 6 field goals. You have Justin Tucker with his field goal issues. You could distill it down to the kicker battle.
Right.
I think we highlighted coming out of that game, Pittsburgh did is the 2 teams that have done a really good job, I think, against Lamar Jackson in particular. Chiefs in week 1. And Lamar still kind of got his, and they were a toe away from scoring 27. But then Pittsburgh in that game, and Pittsburgh's had a history. I know Lamar had a pretty good game against them last year. Throw for throw, they had 7 drops, 3 in the end zone. But Lamar since 2020, 2019 or so, not playing great against Pittsburgh. And in this game, last game, what we highlighted was Pittsburgh doing a pretty good job with gap control, rushing the passer, and just creating tight window throws. And Lamar didn't hit those tight window throws. And, I know it's easier playing against the Giants, but there were some tight window throws that he hit last week against the Giants, right? It doesn't matter that it's the Giants when you're hitting Mark Andrews on the seam, hitting Rashad Bateman on the pinpoint corner route, so that's what Lamar needs to do in this game, right? Pittsburgh's going to make life tough. Can he make those throws this week?
Do you think that this is just a reflection? So obviously TJ Watt got hurt in the last game, and they're potentially without him. That's still up in the air. Like, is this just the injuries for Pittsburgh? George Pickens is still he's been out of the lineup for a little bit. He was doing some warm-up stuff that looked, encouraging, like dynamic, hamstringy testing type of warm-up type stuff. Those are two pretty big players to potentially not be in this game for Pittsburgh. I don't know if that's moving the line that much, but it's definitely a factor in whether or not they would win or lose the game.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge factor, obviously. TJ Watt, the attention that he brings on the defensive side of the ball, we know that the edge rushers opposite him have been outstanding this year with Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig. So Watt bringing that attention opens things up on the other side. And yeah, Pickens, look, Russ, how has Russ made this offense better? It's throwing the ball down the field. And there's no better downfield receiver in Pittsburgh than George Pickens. So yeah, I think it's a huge factor here. Baltimore being at home versus in Pittsburgh last time around. I just think the matchup piece is interesting. And look, I don't want to oversimplify Baltimore and say they don't struggle against good teams. Remember what they did last year. Every time they had a good team thrown at them, they knocked them down pretty much until they ran into Kansas City. But they've offensively, this offense that has been cooking, struggled a little bit against Kansas City, at least from a consistency perspective, struggled against Pittsburgh. Sometimes the matchups just aren't in your favor. And I do wonder how much, that still leans in Pittsburgh's favor, with or without TJ Watt.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that, I think that defense for Pittsburgh has done a fantastic job against Lamar Jackson consistently for years now, and they have better players than they've had for a lot of that period across the board. Like, Lamar Jackson needs to have a good game against Pittsburgh to justify that kind of line.
He does. And look, you talk about the MVP being this narrative award. It is interesting. Lamar is having a better season than last year, Sam. I mean, He just is. Like, look at those stats.
But it's also
34
like
passing touchdowns against 3 picks. This is passer rating of 120.7. The rushing value that he brings. He's having a way better season than last year. And it's like, it's Josh Allen's award.
But that's like, because, you talk about it being a narrative type of award. Like Josh Allen, the last couple, the Rams game, right? Josh Allen, the narrative was Allen was unbelievable. That enhances his MVP candidacy. This is the type of game that would narrative-wise propel Lamar Jackson forward if he has a great game. Like, I was arguing coming out of last week that there's not a huge material difference between what Lamar Jackson did and what Josh Allen did. And everyone's like, well, look, strength of competition. Like, yeah, but they were going against the defense, right? The Lions defense, or the Giants defense versus the Lions banged up mash unit of a defense right now is probably not that different. And I don't think that the pressure, quote unquote, of the Lions offense being able to keep pace is that big a differentiator between the two. So my point is, even though both guys were great last week, I don't think one of them massively propelled themselves forward in an MVP conversation relative to the other, but other people do, right? And this is the type of game that would swing it back in the other direction. If Lamar Jackson balls out and looks phenomenal against the Steelers defense, well, now he's MVP, right? We're going to be like all the way through the game, the fourth quarter, the Ravens are up by 3 scores or whatever. Dan Orlovsky's going to be firing out MVP is wrapped up tweets in the other direction this time.
You already said it was wrapped up 3 weeks ago. It's like the Heisman voters sending in their Heisman vote on Thanksgiving,
right,
before the season's over. Like, what are you doing? Anyway, that's enough MVP talk for now. Lamar's playing great. Again, I think it's not as simple as saying the Ravens haven't played well against good teams. They crushed Denver's defense. They crushed Buffalo back when Buffalo, looked like, Buffalo's always been really good this year, but they destroyed the Bills on Sunday Night Football. That happened this season, by the way. That happened this season for the MVP voters out there. Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen did play each other head to head this season. I know it was weeks ago. I know sometimes you forget it and you only remember the last 3 weeks at best. So anyway, I'm curious to know if Lamar and the Ravens can overcome I think some of their limitations where the Steelers defense has played them extremely well.
Yeah, I think Bateman being in there is a huge part of that. Like, I genuinely think, as much as he's been very maligned for a lot of his career, I honestly think he makes a huge difference to this current version of the offense when he's in there versus when he's not. I think that's a significant limiting factor on what the Ravens offense is capable of doing.
And as you mentioned, George Pickens' hamstring did not participate in practice most recently yesterday, and TJ Watt was limited. George Pickens adds a lot to this offense. I think if he plays, Pittsburgh's got a much better shot. But I think that is why it is 6.5 here, Sam. One last stat to throw out there. Intern Anthony highlights that the Ravens' 5 losses have been by a combined 22 points. That's it. So in this year of, they're not as good, they're not as dominant, it's a couple close losses. And they're very much, I think, the similar team than they've been last year, with maybe a little worse on the defensive side of the ball. Where are you going to go with this one? It is 6.5 right now. Baltimore favored.
Yeah, I'm going with the Steelers. I think I think it's a much closer game than that. I just don't really see the Ravens being 6.5 points favored even at home.
Well, you asked me if it was time to go contrarian, and I think it is. So
here it is.
Harry's taking Pittsburgh. I'll take Baltimore. I don't love it. I really think the matchup thing in Pittsburgh's favor keeps it close. But I'll take Baltimore because I'm playing the game. Playing the game here down the stretch.
Because desperate times calls for desperate measures.
That's right. But I think we'll see a good game Saturday. That's the second Saturday game. We'll get to the first Saturday game in a few minutes. But the Philadelphia Eagles at the Washington Commanders. That's Sunday at 1. Philly's favored by 3.5 in this one. They're 12-2, battling for that number 1 seed. Washington 9-5, trying to make their playoff push. They can get into the playoffs with a win and all sorts of other help between Atlanta, the Rams. It's not full read playoff scenario time yet, Sam. There's 5 different scenarios where Washington can get into the playoffs. We will not get into all of them, but they have a chance. Philly's already clinched a playoff spot. They clinched the NFC East with a win or a tie in this one.
It's not a good year for like suspense when it comes to the playoffs. Yeah. Like, I know all of the entirety of the AFC can effectively be clinched this weekend if results go the right way, except just wild card seeding is the only thing but all 4 division winners can be locked in. All 3 wild card teams can be locked in. And then the only thing that can change is the seeding of the wild cards if a certain set of sequence of results go the right way at, weeks in advance of the final game. So that wouldn't be great from a spectacle point of view, but that's where we are. This is an interesting game because for a couple of reasons. Number one, this was one of those games where, if you remember the last time they played, it was reasonably close. It was reasonably tight. And this was when Jaden Daniels was coming back from that rib injury. I don't know that he was 100% yet. But Washington hung pretty tough. And then it was one of those games where Philadelphia, just in the fourth quarter in particular, just absolutely imposed their will, ran away from them, leaned on them until they broke. And they did break. And it was a couple of Saquon Barkley plays. And then they just went away and it wasn't close in the end.
This was week 11, the first time Saquon Barkley wrapped up the MVP race.
Right. So you've got that dynamic, right? Number one, does a more healthy Jaden Daniels change that approach? Are they able to keep pace better late in the game? Number two, are they simply able to hold up better against this Eagles team that does want to lean on you until you break? And then the other element is this has come up with the Lions, like this chase for the number 1 seed in the NFC, which at least is one compelling playoff narrative. But there was a chart out there yesterday, I think, that was like number of players on IR, right? And the Lions are by far and away number 1. They got 22 players, I think, on IR, which is 4 more than any other team in the NFL. But the Eagles are at the other end of the spectrum. They're one of the more healthy teams. So, in fact, are Minnesota. Like the other 2 teams chasing that number 1 seed in the NFC are both comparatively extremely healthy. So, you look at the injury report, for example, for Philadelphia. There's a ton of players that didn't practice, but they're all just being rested. It's like nobody's hurt. We're all just giving them the day off because, you keep them healthy. So you've got that working for Philadelphia as well. Like this incredibly healthy team who already looks like one of the best teams in the league, just resting people for the crunch division game against Washington.
Yeah, and just to highlight that last game as well, that was in the middle of the stretch where Washington couldn't get any passes out wide to their receivers, Terry McLaurin. Right. limited until the very end of the game. Quinyon Mitchell has been doing a great job. But Quinyon Mitchell, Darius Slay, Cooper DeJean, all those guys, right? They're all playing well on the back end. I can't believe I haven't brought up one of my favorite narratives from the last few years when it comes to the Eagles. But remember how Howie Roseman and the Eagles always build through the trenches. They always draft offensive and defensive linemen. And if you're ranking offensive and defensive lines, almost every year they're in the top 5, both lines, right? And the only difference in when the Eagles became Super Bowl contenders or Super Bowl champions in 2015 is how they played on the back end. It's like, where are they getting what's their secondary looking like this year, basically? Because every year the line was consistent. Yeah. And if 2017, all of a sudden they had a top 5 coverage unit, 2022, they go to the Super Bowl, have one of the top coverage units. They get those massive years from Darius Slay and James Bradbury. And this year's the same, of course, doing it with a big youth movement, right? With Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean as first and second round picks. So this is the formula that has worked for Philly, right? Consistency up front. And that's not easy, by the way, to consistently have a top 5 offensive and defensive line. That's not easy, but they continue to do that. And now they're adding the periphery, right? Which defense is the secondary, and on offense is Saquon Barkley. And now you have these other ways to win. And what we saw last week, unbelievable 22-play drive to kill the clock and end it. Philly has every way to win imaginable, and I think they're peaking at the right time, which is the opposite of what they did last year, which was, one of the biggest collapses in NFL history.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great barometer. We already saw it, obviously, but I think with a healthy Jaden Daniels, it's a great barometer for where Washington are exactly. Like, we know that they're pretty good, but the Eagles are a standard. I mean, this is a team legitimately expected to be in the NFC Championship game at this stage, right? Whether or not they're on the road, I think they are expected to be in that game at this point in the season. So this is the standard in the NFC. Like, if you are going to be a legitimate playoff force, not just make it and be like, oh, look, great, we made the playoffs. If you want to actually be a factor, you need to be able to go at least toe-to-toe with a team like this for all 4 quarters, not 3 of the 4.
Yeah, so I agree. Barometer type game for Washington. They need to win, probably 2 out of 3 just to confirm a playoff spot over these next couple of weeks. And, can they do it at home this time? They're still 3.5-point underdogs against Philly, who is rolling right now. So where are you going to go with this one?
Where am I going to go with this one? Philadelphia. I'm going to buy into the Eagles. At least I think Washington will do a better job of keeping it tight than last time. Like, I think they will play it tough. I think they will keep it pretty close, but I think the Eagles will go away enough to be able to cover this line.
I think it'll stay close again. I mean, it was only an 8-point game last time around with Philly pulling away late, right? So I'll take Washington. Because Harry's taking Philly. I'm just going full contrarian. You're in my head right now. You're in my head, as is my 9-year-old in my head. We were tied just 2 weeks ago, and he's killing me here.
That's a rough place to be when the 9-year-old is shaking your confidence.
Yeah, I mean, because he talks trash a lot, man. It's not fair. All right, Minnesota Vikings at the Seattle Seahawks Sunday at 4:05. Vikings coming off of that impressive Monday night win against Chicago. They're 12-2. Seahawks are 8-6. Big question here is going to be Geno Smith's health. We saw the Seahawks struggle against the Packers on Sunday Night Football. Plus, Geno Smith got hurt. Vikings favored by 3 here on the road.
Yeah, the Geno Smith thing is huge. I mean, that completely changes this game. It's a definite, without Geno Smith in the lineup. I don't think that
he did play. I mean, he did practice.
Right. And it felt like an injury that wasn't going to keep him out long term. But I think that's, if he doesn't play, the Seahawks are screwed. Like, that offense is non-functional with Sam Howell in the lineup. Not necessarily because Sam Howell is individually non-functional, though he certainly has the capacity to be that in any given week, but because that interior of the offensive line is such a mess going up against a Flores defense. Howell can't, he can't A, offset that, and B, probably plays into it being worse the way he plays the game. So if they don't have Geno, they are absolutely toast. With Geno, it's still a massive challenge because you're still going up against that Flores defense. You're still being shown all the exotic looks, the various different things, and the interior of the offensive line is still extremely bad. So, Geno has a better chance of offsetting that, but it's still a massive hill to climb.
Yeah, their pass protection hasn't been good. Quick aside on Sam Howell. I think we're in this world. I think we'll spend a lot of time this offseason talking about who's the next second chance quarterback, who's the next Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, who's the next guy to take a shot on. Names like Zach Wilson will come up. Someone just tweeted us about Jake Browning maybe coming up, which, if you remember how good Jake Browning was last year, I think he might come up. Sam Howell's the interesting one to me. And I'm thinking this and then watching him on Sunday night, and it's like, oh man, am I overrating Sam Howell? Because there was a lot of good to his game, just took so many negative plays, so many sacks. And the other day you saw that it's tough to function behind this offensive line. And my point is, I think it highlights, how well Geno Smith has played this year to be, to keep the offense on schedule, the inconsistency of the run game. Geno Smith's played, pretty good football behind that offensive line. But yeah, that matchup with Flores and this Vikings defense, not in Seattle's favor this week.
I mean, some teams are going to have to get creative at the quarterback position, because I think, there might only be 2 quarterbacks in this draft that anybody is comfortable with, right? And they're going to go in the top 5 picks, you would assume, based off need. So anyone that's outside of that bubble and doesn't have their QB is going to have to do some weird things, whether it's Sam Darnold, whether it's the reclamation of Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers, the old Achilles quarterbacks, or whether it's a second chance for some rando, Browning, Sam Howell, Jameis. Maybe somebody's like, we're desperate enough that Jameis gets the start again. Who the hell knows? But somebody's going to have to get creative when they're on the outside looking in for a QB. I think you're right, though. Like this, Geno has done an incredible job with this group of playmakers. The playmakers are great. The tackles are pretty good. The interior is such a mess, though. Like, it's such a problem. And you only really get an appreciation for that as soon as you take him out of the lineup and you see what it looks like with Sam Howell back there, who, again, like, I don't want to act like Sam Howell is individually utter and total garbage. Like, Sam Howell had 30 big-time throws the year that he was the starter. That's a pretty high number. And yet you put him back there and it just doesn't, like, the offense can't work. So Geno, there's a ton of credit. And really, Geno would be one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL right now if you simply remove red zone decision-making, which appears to be some kind of inbuilt, glitch in his matrix. But outside of that,
third straight year, basically. Yeah.
Like that it's very unusual for a guy to struggle in a very specific aspect of the game in terms of field position. But like red zone Geno, not very good at all. Every other part of Geno, legitimately like a top 10, top 5 quarterback.
Yeah. One of the interesting numbers I pulled up, he's got a 57 passer rating under pressure, not very good, even relative to the rest of the league, but his PFF grade's solid. It's top 10, top 11-ish.
Right.
I just don't think Seattle, I think the pressure's coming too quickly.
Yeah.
They're not handling one-on-one pressure. They're not handling blitz pressure. Again, the matchup with Flores isn't great. They need to have better blitz answers. I think that's where JSN comes in. You got to get rid of the ball quickly. You got to get it to, somebody where where they're going to be. JSN's really become that guy, Jackson Smith and Jigba for the Seahawks. So I expect a big game from him. The Vikings usually give up their passing yards, as we highlight every week. They'll give it up but generally make you one-dimensional, stop the run, and create negative plays, right? So Geno's, look, when we're always take care of the ball in the red zone, win the turnover battle, but times 100 in this game, Geno Smith can't make those red zone mistakes. Made it against Green Bay the other day, and you just don't have that margin for error.
It's interesting again because Minnesota's cornerbacks in particular are really banged up. Like Gilmore's down with a hamstring. Guy's not the youngest. He's not a spring chicken anymore. I imagine a hamstring injury for him might linger a little bit longer than it does for other corners. Fabian Moreau, who's been the first corner off the bench, is dealing with a hip injury as well. Like their corners are pretty banged up, and it wasn't a great group to begin with. So on the one hand, you've got like Seattle's wide receivers against Minnesota's DBs is actually a pretty healthy matchup in their favor, but interior of the offensive line is a mess. The Vikings front is really good in terms of how they can scheme up pressure. So it's like there might be enough going in their favor that they can completely hide that matchup, where if they weren't, it would be a really big matchup in Seattle's favor, but it might overall actually tilt towards the Vikings unless Geno is able to play out of his mind and just get the ball to those guys anyway.
Yeah, and they're capable every week, right? They're capable of putting those big plays up on the board. And I would say the matchup on the other side is awesome as well. We've highlighted Minnesota's pass catchers. I've called them the best in the league with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. We get to see Jefferson and Addison against Reek Woolen, against Devin Witherspoon. So some awesome matchups on that side of the ball. Mike McDonald's defense, which has been better against the run overall in recent weeks, but Aaron Jones runs the ball pretty well. It is a good mix of what Minnesota can do offensively against a pretty solid Seattle defense. So I do like that matchup just from a viewer perspective.
Yeah, I mean, in particular, I think the wide receivers versus the corners on that side of the ball is just a great box office matchup, right? Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, probably are they the best 1-2? I mean, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase has got to be in that conversation as well, but they're up there, right? They're one of the best 1-2s in the NFL, going up against the Seattle corners of, Reek Woolen, Devin Witherspoon. They've got horses as well. That's a really fun side of the ball.
All right, man, we've got Minnesota favored by 3 in Seattle. Over-under is just 43.5 per our friends over at FanDuel. Where are you going to go with this one?
So I'm taking Minnesota if for some reason Geno doesn't play, but assuming Geno's playing, I'll take the Seahawks.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Seahawks to cover. Assuming Geno. I don't know what would happen with Sam Howell against Flores' defense. Could get ugly. Harry's going to take Minnesota, so I am disagreeing with Harry, my son, on the first 3 games. Then we have Harry's Razors. We're going to tell you about our friends over at Harry's.
You want me to step in here? Not my son.
The holiday special's over. Harry still has a great deal for all of you to try their products, which Sam and I have used. Great products, the 5-blade razor, the foaming gel. I mean, we've got all the great stuff. Foaming shave gel, a great shave. Got me through Movember when I needed, silky smooth cheeks. So love that from Harry's. What?
I'm just silky smooth cheeks is not a phrase I expected to appear in the podcast today. That's all.
Well, that's because I'm not reading verbatim. German engineered blades made in their own factory. They stay sharp longer. They've got the customizable delivery options for scheduled refills for as low as $2. That's half what you pay for other big brands. And as I mentioned, you get the 5-blade razor, the weighted handle, foaming shave gel, and a travel cover for just $3. It's over at harrys.com/checkthemic. So get the edge on your shave with Harry's. Get started with a $13 trial set for just $3. It's harrys.com/checkthemic. That's harrys.com/checkthemic for your $3 trial set. Shots fired, Sam.
It's good work. Good work.
Houston Texans at the Kansas City Chiefs. This is the first game Saturday, 1 o'clock. Chiefs favored right now by 3.5. The sleeper app that we use for our contest, that locks in on Tuesday. The Texans were favored by 2.5 at that point, with some assumption that I think Mahomes was going to be hurt. But he's been a full participant at practice. One of the world's greatest healers, Sam, Patrick Mahomes. He's either just really dramatic when he gets hurt or a great healer, somewhere in between. But every time it looks like he can't even walk, he just comes back and plays anyway.
I don't even know if it's particularly good healing as much as the man's just willing to play through the type of injury that would normally keep guys out. I mean, that playoff run when he had the high ankle sprain, he couldn't move, really. He couldn't get around. It wasn't like, oh, he's actually okay. It was obviously over-dramatizing the injury. He was badly hurt and was somehow able to mitigate that by just playing in a completely different way. Genuinely phenomenal play by him to not let that affect his game in a massive way. But I think that was real. It wasn't rapid healing. He was just playing through an injury that most quarterbacks wouldn't. And somehow, the reason he was able to do that is because, or more to the point, the reason most quarterbacks wouldn't is because most quarterbacks would not be able to maintain a high level of play with that kind of encumbrance of an injury. That's what made Mahomes amazing, is he was able to play like he wasn't particularly hurt. So I think he can go out there. I was tweeting back and forth with Ryan Fitzpatrick a bit about this. And it's to me, I think I would sit him in this game because you've got this stretch of, tough games, tough opponents, tough pass rushes, and there's no space for this ankle to heal. And okay, you are still fighting for that number 1 seed, which is important, but Mahomes being upright is more important, right? So I would probably sit him in this game. And Fitzpatrick made the point, well, it's not like it's the first time, right? We saw him in that playoff run. He's done this before. What I do think is new is this would be the first time he's had to do this with a massive problem on one spot of the offensive line, right? He's never had to do this before where the left tackle was a turnstile, and that's currently the dynamic at play regardless of who they put out there, whether it's Wanye Morris, whether it's Sua Mataia, or whether it's last week's plan of throwing left guard Joe Thuney out there and asking him to man the left tackle spot, which weakens left tackle and left guard from the guy that has to step in. So that is new. Right now we've got Mahomes going out there. I do think he'll be able to play. I do think he'll be able to play well, but he will be somewhat hobbled and has pressure coming consistently because he's going up against the Houston pass rush.
And I mentioned too, in that 22 run, it did feel like the offensive line just stepped up in a special way. The interior of the offensive line, they were giving him extra room. He plays a little bit differently. Why did he get hurt on Sunday? There was pressure, but he kept moving into pressure, stepping into it, trying to make plays while getting hit. He doesn't avoid contact, right? He waits till the last second to get the throw off. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Got hurt the other day in part because, he's having to maneuver pressure. I think it does make him play within structure a little bit more. I think when he's hobbled, I actually think that could work in Mahomes' favor this weekend, and especially against the Texans pass rush, right? So I think Mahomes is going to force himself to play within rhythm a little bit more, right? Get to 1 to 2 to 3 instead of just 1 to 2, and then, hey, let's go make magic happen. So I think that could be an advantage. A lot of moving parts here, too. The left tackle situation that you mentioned, DJ Humphries hasn't practiced yet. If he comes back, still hasn't played a full game in over a year. Joe Thuney kicking out, that does hurt the interior. You've got Donnell Hunter, Will Anderson on the other side, guys like Danico Autry who could push the pocket. He caused some problems last week, with the Texans defense causing a lot of pressure. And then you have Hollywood Brown back at practice. He signed a 1-year deal this offseason. Remember the narrative coming into the year. Hollywood Brown's a deep threat. Xavier Worthy's a deep threat. These guys are going to help Mahomes stretch the field, coming off a year where he had the second worst passer rating on 20-plus yard throws in the NFL. We haven't been able to see both of those guys on the field. And by the way, DeAndre Hopkins wasn't in the mix when all of this was going down. So fascinating season for Kansas City, surviving all of this to be 13-1 at this point, getting Marquise Brown back into the mix. We'll see how rusty he is as well, but it seems like Kansas City at least they certainly have more dudes to worry about on the outside for Houston, who's given up a lot of big play opportunities.
Yeah. Houston's got this fascinating defense where their pass rush is nasty. They will give up some big plays, but you've also got, if you test Derek Stingley, you run the risk of a big turnover in the opposite direction. Like Derek Stingley, CJ Stroud was talking about how he's trying to convince Derek Stingley to play offense, right? He thinks his ball tracking ability in the air is like as good as anybody's ever seen. I don't know if I go quite that far, but it's really, really good for a DB. Like Derek Stingley is up there with, Trayvon Diggs, guys like that as maybe the most dangerous or risky cornerback in the NFL to test, because if the ball is slightly off, it could be picked and taken the other way.
I highlighted last week against the Dolphins too, Kamari Lassiter, 4'6", 40 corner, stuff we talk about during draft time and never talk about during the season, but I'll bring it up here. Marquise Brown is a sub 4.4 guy. Xavier Worthy is the fastest guy. If you get those guys one-on-one, does the speed actually matter?
Right.
I think it's overrated generally, because if you're a good corner, you play physical enough, your limitations, but just something to keep an eye on when the Chiefs take those downfield shots.
It only matters if the guy allows himself to be in a position where it matters. We saw it with Cam Taylor-Britt, right? If you get a hand on him, 4.2 doesn't mean anything because you've immediately taken away his ability to run cleanly at that speed by you. If you don't get a hand on him, that's when it matters. So, Lassiter is fine unless he puts himself in a position where he allows Worthy to have a completely clean run where he doesn't touch him. Then 0.4 of a second in the 40 is a significant problem, particularly if you then have to try and recover in the air. That's the scenario where it's a problem. Like if you can get the free release, if you can get him with a run at Lassiter where he doesn't get a hand on him, then he can be toast. But otherwise, you can absolutely offset. Richard Sherman is maybe the best ever at this, right? Where there's a ton of wide receivers that would have absolutely smoked Richard Sherman one-on-one in a foot race, but Sherman never let that happen because it was impossible to run around him without him getting his hands on you at some stage in some way, which slows you up, and you're never able to just get that running start clean by him.
Last thing on that side of the ball, Texans pass rush. they're going to have to make an impact in this game, and if they do, I don't remember exactly off the top of my head, but when Mahomes was playing through the ankle, I don't think the Bengals in the AFC Championship got after him all that well. The Eagles could barely get any pressure on him on that slippery field in Arizona.
Right.
In that game, the Jags, when he was playing through it in the divisional round, like the game that he got hurt, they weren't getting any pressure. So if Houston actually does get pressure on Mahomes, look, does he play through it? Does he still maneuver? He's still great at avoiding sacks, but he's also got the highest sack rate of his career this year.
Yeah.
He's been less good at that this year. If they could sack him 4, 5, 6 times, doesn't matter if you have Marquise Brown out there. On the other hand, if Marquise Brown is open quick, those guys are open quick, that mitigates the pressure. So that side of the ball, those matchups are all going to be really interesting to watch. Other side, Houston's pass protection. There's a reason why they've regressed offensively. Pass protection's been terrible. CJ Stroud's regressed in turn with that. Running game has been pretty good. It does feel like the Texans have to play their game. The Joe Mixon gets 27 carries. They're all 4.5. He's averaging 4.5 a pop, and they're controlling the clock and slowing down the entire game, which actually is how KC likes to play these days. Actually, right. So
they're kind of. The offensive line, I think, is the big limiting factor for the Texans in terms of weapons. They're kind of back to where they should be. Nico Collins is back in the action. He looks spectacular still. Joe Mixon is back. Tank Dell is still there. The only thing that they're missing is Stephon Diggs, who obviously is done for the year. But generally, the weaponry is kind of where it's supposed to be and looking a little bit better because of that. The offensive line, though, they're still shuffling it around. They're still, making changes. Blake Fisher has come in at right tackle. Titus Howard is now playing left guard. Like, they can't solve that interior, particularly the left side, the left guard center axis has been a problem for them. And it's not getting fixed. Like, they don't have the personnel. Like, at some point, I think they're just going to have to settle on a combination of 5 and hope that improves as they keep going. But now that 5 has got to block Chris Jones, right? That's not going to go well.
Charles Omenihu back the last few weeks as well with his length, difficult to block. I think both teams are going to have trouble protecting the quarterback, and it'll come down to which QB will make some plays under pressure, which playmakers are going to be, make some special plays.
Remember when the Houston Texans played the Jets, right? Quinnen Williams, who actually hasn't been that great this year relative to previous years, went absolutely nuts against this interior offensive line from the Texans. Like, he was the guy that forced them to completely reshuffle. Like, the 2 guys we've been trying at guard, neither one of those guys is an option going forward. They got wrecked so hard by Quinnen Williams. Chris Jones is A, better than Quinnen Williams, and B, has been better this year. If it's anything like that rendered this offense completely non-functional.
All right, man. Let's make some picks here. Again, earlier in the week, if you're on the Sleeper app, you had Houston favored.
Right.
So you're probably going to take Kansas City as the underdog because that line was Mahomes-less.
Yeah.
Now they're favored by 3.5. Using that line, who would you take here?
Right. If you're in the Sleeper app, I think it's a no-brainer. You're taking the Chiefs. Even without it, even with the line going to where it is now, I still think the Chiefs end up covering this one, bizarrely, though I'm intensely nervous that Mahomes behind that, not even just with the left tackle situation, is a massive problem.
I'm going to take Houston because Harry's taking Kansas City, so we're going to stick contrarian.
Naturally.
I like Houston a little bit in this game anyway. I honestly think that the injury, and usually, it often ends up making Mahomes play a cleaner brand of football.
I think that's a good point.
And I think that could work in his favor here.
I do genuinely think that that's a good point. And this is another thing, another reason Mahomes is as good as he is. Like, not many quarterbacks can completely change the way they play the game for whatever reason, right? Whether it's defense, circumstances. Like, it takes a genuinely great quarterback to be like, I like doing it this way, but the best way to win is a different way this weekend for whatever reason. Mahomes has already shown he can do that. Like, he can adapt his game when the injury means he can't be the regular Mahomes. I just worry that even with playing in that style, the left tackle problem is too big.
Yeah, that's all fair. So you and Harry will take Kansas City. I will take Houston.
Yep.
Let's go Tampa Bay Bucks at the Dallas Cowboys. The Bucks favored by 3.5. They're in the driver's seat in the NFC South at 8-6. Cowboys are 6-8. It's Sunday Night Football this week. Mayfield versus Rush. Cowboys playing better overall in recent weeks, so I think we got a pretty good game Sunday night.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Bucs are, I think, one of the most entertaining teams to watch this year. Like, every game that they play in seems to be pretty fun, and now Dallas with a couple of guys back do genuinely seem to be pretty resurgent. I don't know how much of that is, again, who have they been playing? Like, competition is going to help that, but Micah Parsons in particular, like, that dude is a defensive player of the year caliber performer most weeks, and if you show up with one of those guys, it changes the dynamic of everything.
How about his matchup with Tristan Wirfs? Wirfs has a 93.6 pass blocking grade. Remember, he got hurt a couple weeks ago, barely missed any time. When they go one-on-one, the game where Micah Parsons, I don't want to say, put himself on the map, it was his debut, but it was the first game of the season, 2021. Parsons was still a linebacker in name, and he lines up opposite Tristan Wirfs, hits him with a spin move, and it's like, whoa, dude, Wirfs is legit. He might be the best pass-protecting right tackle in all of football, and Parsons beat him with a spin. That was when Micah really started to, it was his first game, but you started to realize this guy needs to rush the passer full time. You can't put a linebacker tag on him, and the rest is history. He's been outstanding. So if and when they match up, Wirfs, of course, playing on the left side right now. And then overall, Tampa Bay has been pass protecting really well. I think it's coincided, like their PFF grade second coincides with Baker Mayfield having one of the lowest average depths of target in the NFL, having a quick release. But Tampa Bay's done a really good job getting the ball out of his hands, and especially the last few weeks, this combination of scheming it up, Baker getting the ball to his playmakers, Mike Evans looking like a dude once again. And, Tampa Bay's offense has been rolling. And then you combine the run game with it. They have a lot of different ways to win right now on that side of the ball.
Yeah. According to PFF, Wirfs has given up 9 total pressures this season, only one of which has been anything more significant than a hurry, and never more than 2 in a game, right? That's nuts. People were saying that Joe Thuney did a pretty solid job filling in at left tackle, and he gave up 10 pressures. Like, that's literally more in one game than Tristan Wirfs has given up all season long for the Bucs. So, yeah, whether he's able to hold up against Micah Parsons, how much Micah Parsons is going to go up against Luke Gedeke on the other side, who himself is a pretty good pass-blocking right tackle, maybe better than pretty good, but just not as good as Tristan Wirfs, definitely a fun matchup to see. And then how much they move Micah Parsons around and get him matched up on interior players as well, which he's equally capable of doing. But that side of the ball is definitely fascinating. The Cowboys with some corners back as well. Like, they've got dangerous players in the secondary that can pick off passes. Baker Mayfield is, willing to put the ball in the air quite a lot, give those guys chances, simply make mistakes sometimes. That side, I think, should be fireworks.
Most turnover-worthy plays in the NFL this year. We've got Kirk Cousins with 24, and then Baker's number 2 with 22. Then Sam Darnold, Jameis Winston at 18. He's 4th in the league in turnover-worthy plays, despite playing only 9 games total and starting, 5? Jameis with the highest turnover-worthy play percentage. To be fair to Baker, his turnover-worthy play percentage is only 11th worst, but, so there's a volume aspect there. But, there's 1, 2, 3 plays a game that he's serving up to the defense. It's been in inopportune times, too, at the end of the half. And it's interesting, Dallas's defense, I think, the last couple of weeks has morphed a little bit into what they were previously. Opportunistic on the back end. They have the ability to turn the ball over. They have the ability to rush the passer. Osa Odighizuwa, Carl Lawson, they complemented Micah Parsons extremely well last week against the Panthers. That's their best shot, right? They got to create some havoc, create some turnovers against this Bucs offense.
Yeah, definitely. Like, those playmakers need to show up in a big way on defense. And, yeah, Carl Lawson's a good player to shout out for Dallas. Like, this was a guy, remember a few years ago before he got hurt, he was one of the better – he wasn't even really a situational pass rusher, but wasn't necessarily the kind of every down dominant force. But he was a good, consistent pass rusher and then kind of got the move in free agency, immediately got hurt, and has never really been the same guy again. But he's had a few games this season for Dallas where he's shown up and made a real impact. And maybe it's not volume, like he's not getting 10 pressures a game like Micah Parsons, but because of his sort of style, like that short, compact, explosive pass rusher, his plays, like the impact plays that he makes, can be massive difference makers. Like, he had a game earlier against Atlanta where he showed against, good players, like good offensive linemen, where he had a couple of sacks, instant wins around the corner. Same thing for Carolina. Like Lawson's had a couple of games where he's made a real impact.
Yes, and Odighizuwa is one of the more underrated interior pass rushers in the NFL as well. The other point, Dallas, look, they're playing better. They're running the ball more effectively since they've turned the ball over essentially to Rico Dowdle as the go-to guy. So I think Dallas has way more ways to win this year, and it would be lazy to go back to the first 5, 6, 7 games where their run defense looked historically bad, but it's still similar unit. And the way the Bucs have run the ball, it's certainly not an advantage for Dallas. So I think the Bucs have chances to win on the ground, control the ball. If Baker takes care of the ball, they should win. They're a better team. But I think Cooper Rush making some big-time throws last week, Dallas's run game, their pass rush, it's going to be way more competitive than maybe I would have thought it would be a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
So Sunday Night Football, Bucs by 3.5. Anything else you want to add to the game, and then we'll make picks?
No, the only other thing is, you've got the Cooper Rush factor. Like, what are we going to get from him? I think the crumb of truth in the Skip Bayless thing is, like, he's a pretty good backup, and he's capable of good games, but he's also a backup. And that means he's capable of bad games as well. So there's quite a large range of outcomes, I think, for Cooper Rush. What exactly are we going to get from him in any given week?
Yeah, and he was a much better backup. Again, played well last week, played okay against the Bengals, I guess. He was a much better backup when he was working with a 12-win team, when he was working with a very good offensive line, a good group of playmakers. It's not the same Dallas team, but more competitive than they were a few weeks ago. Tampa by 3.5 here. And anything on the line here? No, nothing on the line as far as elimination scenarios.
Nothing on the line. I'm going to go Dallas to cover that.
Yeah, I'm going Tampa. Harry's going to go Tampa.
We've also, of course, passed the point in the season where the sun is going to blind Dallas's own players.
It's a night game too, though, Sam. So
right.
The sun.
But even if it wasn't, we've passed the point where sun is a factor because that only really hits around Thanksgiving time. After that, it's okay.
Where's the moon height on Sunday night? Can we check that?
I don't think you get blinded by the moon though in quite the same way.
Never know. Dallas can make it happen. Detroit Lions at the Chicago Bears Sunday at 1. Lions favored by 6.5. Of course, they're 12-2, trying to hold the number 1 seed opportunity here. They're going to be playing Minnesota Week 18. 3 teams at 12-2 in the NFC. Bears haven't won since, I don't know, way before the election or something. They're 4-10. It's been a while for Chicago here.
Yeah, and if you remember this game, it was Thanksgiving, right? Where the first half was one of the biggest beatdowns of any game in the season. Like the Detroit Lions were absolutely annihilating Chicago. I think it was 18 first downs before Chicago recorded their first down in the game. And then somehow in the second half, like they fumbled before going in for yet another touchdown, and somehow the game was just within reach by the time it reached halftime, despite it being an absolute one-sided blowout. And then somehow in the second half, Chicago kept chipping away and bringing it back, and they did get it pretty close to the point where they then butchered the time at the end of the game. Since that, Chicago's defense has definitely played worse. The offense has been all over the place. And Detroit's defense has been getting ever more beat up. So I generally think that we're going to see something much more akin to the first half of that game than the second half. But the Lions' defense is way more damaged than it was at that point, as is Chicago. So it's like the Lions are still a much better team, but they are way more banged up on defense.
Yeah, and I know you wanted to spend a whole show reading quarter splits and how this team is in the first quarter versus the fourth quarter and everything. And the analyst in me says, oh, they're all small sample sizes. How much do you make of this? But every single week, I don't know what the tally is right now in recent games, but at one point, Chicago is being outscored like 55-10 in the first half over a 4-week period. Didn't get any better last week against Minnesota. I could easily see the same game flow. I could see the same game flow. The only thing that kept Chicago in it was Jahmyr Gibbs' fumble,
right?
And they, forced 3 field goals, right, in the red zone. Detroit could have been up by 30 if they just played a little better in the red zone. So I think Detroit's offense is just going to be too much for Chicago. Detroit's defense it'll be easier to play defense in Chicago than in the Dome against Buffalo. So I don't want to completely overrate that game. And 2 weeks ago, they played really well despite all of their injuries and everything. So I like Detroit quite a bit, and I think they're laser focused coming off a loss with the number one seed on the line over these next 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think it'll be a similar game to last time, except I think the Bears, whatever witchcraft they were working with to execute all these comebacks in games they were getting their ass kicked in, I think seems to have worn off. I mean, the Vikings game last week was an example where similar dynamic, right? Not quite as extreme, but the first time they played Minnesota was walking away with that game, and then eventually the Bears were able to create that comeback, got it to overtime, and still lost. This time, it just didn't happen, right? They just did not have the ability to execute that kind of comeback. The offense is not functioning the same way. I kind of feel like the same thing's going to happen this time. Like the Lions offense will just roll. The Bears won't be able to slow them down much at all. And then I don't think, even against a wrecked Detroit defense, I just don't think the Bears offense is going to be able to execute that kind of comeback again.
The other thing to highlight, we've talked about all the injuries on the defensive side of the ball for Detroit. They're also down David Montgomery right now.
Yeah.
And Montgomery.
Is that officially for the year now?
I believe it's officially for the year. What, MCL?
Yeah.
Was it? So, I mean, that's a huge blow because he brings that attitude, the power, tackle breaking ability, but in a different way. I've never really been able to quantify it, but when you think about what the defense has to deal with, the power of Montgomery, the speed, quickness, acceleration of Gibbs, route running of Amon-Ra, size and route running of Laporta, speed of Jameson Williams. You just lose one of those dynamic elements that Detroit's offense throws at you. So can Jahmyr Gibbs be productive as a 20 carry guy? Absolutely. But I just think it changes. It's like you're losing a pitch, right? You're losing a change of pace. You're losing a different style to throw at a defense. And Montgomery was kind of a not streaky runner, but when he got going, remember the overtime game against the Rams way back in week 1? It's like we're going to run downhill zone with Montgomery, one cut downhill zone and just attack with power. He was that guy. And so I think you lose a little bit if you're Detroit. And, again, everyone else just has to step up. And I always come back to Goff has to play a clean brand of football, and I think they'll be okay.
I think what you lose is, I don't even know if you lose. So it is an interesting situation because on the one hand, I think you gain quite a lot by just feeding Jahmyr Gibbs more. Like I think his explosiveness, his ability to create big plays, particularly behind an offensive line that's really good and able to, pave the way, I think is really powerful. On the other hand, David Montgomery doesn't lose yardage. Like that guy is really good at not getting negative plays, and that has value as well. Again, behind an offensive line that's really good. So I don't know what the net of that is. Like, is that a net positive, your greater chance of explosive plays versus your also greater chance of a negative play or not even a negative play necessarily, but a failure on offense, right? So maybe a play that gains 1 or 2 yards, which is still a positive play technically, but relative to keeping ahead of the chains, it's a negative play. So I don't know what the answer to that is. Like, it might actually be a net positive for Detroit to simply give the ball to Jahmyr Gibbs more, but it might come at the expense of those negative, failing offensive plays.
I was talking on mute.
No.
I think it's a fair point where you're giving Gibbs more opportunities to make big plays. I also think it gives Ben Johnson a chance to get into his bag a little bit more Jameson Williams end around type plays. And I guess my fear is not so much this week, it's down the road, the depth. You're
right.
One Jahmyr Gibbs injury away from really getting depleted in the backfield. Yeah. So a little more pressure on everybody. 6.5 is the line here, Sam. Where are you going with this one?
Of course, there's also Ben Johnson, if he needs to, can just dial up some Penei Sewell runs, It's always that option.
I would, put Penei in the backfield. Just make it happen. Get your playmakers into, and then there's going to be some sort of counter to the Dan Skipper in the flat play. They'll have a play off that play. Like they're setting up all sorts of stuff. I do kind of hope it peaks in the Super Bowl with Penei Sewell throwing to Dan Skipper for the game winner or something ridiculous, right?
Penei Sewell with a throwback to Jared Goff, who then throws it to Dan Skipper for the touchdown.
Yeah. Thank you. We're just going to add layers to this.
Or maybe
What's the
Dan
Lions
Skipper.
up?
Maybe that Dan Skipper then executes a rugby pass lateral, hook and lateral to Amonra, who then goes in for the touchdown. There's a lot we can do with this. There really is.
Yeah. We should just make up a new one and just add more elements to it every single week leading up to the playoffs.
Love it. I'm gonna go
6.5. Where are you going?
I'm going with the Lions to cover that. I believe the Bears have run out of gas, and I think the Lions, even with a banged up defense, are still going to have way too much.
Really quick, did you see the Caleb Williams slouching on the sideline thing? There's been a lot of talk about his body language, not just this year, but in previous years. Do you buy into any of that stuff? He's worn out, he's tired, he's frustrated, or is it just everyone would be frustrated at that point? We all show it differently.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's two different elements to that, right? There's what is the body language, and then there's is it problematic? I
can't believe I asked this. I hate body language analysis.
Well, this was Jay Cutler, right? Remember, Jay Cutler used to always get that. Jay Cutler's body language was always atrocious, and the question was, does that matter or not? I think
if it shows in your play, right? Jay Cutler played he shrugged his shoulders, whatever. There's a safety there. I'm just going to chuck it anyway. He played his bad body language. I think there's other quarterbacks who play when they have a bad press conference, they kind of play like that.
But
Maybe
this
too
is
emotional, whatever. I think so I don't know if I've seen that from Caleb Williams yet. I don't think I've seen it in his play.
But this is you rewrite history according to the circumstances. It's
Absolutely.
Baker Mayfield and Joe Burrow share a lot of commonalities in terms of attitude and feistiness, and Joe Burrow, it's always a positive because he's almost always spectacular. Baker Mayfield goes between amazing, terrible, anything in the middle, and whether or not his attitude is a problem depends on what version of Baker you are currently experiencing, right? Which I think is just, that shouldn't happen. I don't think you should be changing your analysis based off the outcome.
You did it this weekend. You're like, oh, Mac Jones celebrates too much. What if he's just a fiery guy? He's excited to be playing football on a Sunday.
Well, I just think he's always like that and shouldn't be. That's slightly different.
You should have some self-awareness that you're not good and you shouldn't have fun playing football. I got it.
Exactly. That's exactly my point. For this one, look, at the time they were zooming in on this, he was getting his ass killed by that Minnesota Flores defense. And I think that was a very genuine reflection of how he was feeling at the time, which is, I'm getting wrecked out there. This kind of sucks right now. And I don't really have a problem with that. I don't actually know whether that has some kind of impact on teammates. I don't know if that has some kind of subconscious effect where you look over your quarterbacks slouched on the thing, buried, exhausted, feeling the weight of the game that he's currently experiencing. Are you man, we are kind of getting our ass kicked out here? And does that feed into a self-perpetuating cycle? I don't know the answer to that. So I don't have a massive problem with him doing it because I think it was an honest reflection of exactly what he was feeling at the time and a justifiable one, right? It's not like he did that after one sack where everything had been going pretty well. He was getting wrecked at that point and he felt it and he expressed it, and I'm okay with that. And I don't have an answer to the question of whether or not that actually does anything.
Great. Glad I brought it up. Terrible idea to bring it up. We're all taking Detroit to cover the 6.5 here. All right, let's get to my PrizePicks lineup here, Sam. We unveiled your lineup yesterday. We'll talk about it again here in a couple minutes, but I'm going to go through my picks right now. PrizePicks, you could join us, of course. Download the app, check the mic, promo, $50 free when you play $5. So my PrizePicks lineup this weekend, I'm looking at Josh Allen less than 44.5 rushing yards. So it's a pretty high projection for Josh Allen, 44.5. And I'm pulling this out because he's playing the Patriots. And I'm assuming they're not going to need Josh Allen's running ability as much against the Patriots. Maybe New England hangs tough, but I think they'll be able to hand the ball off to James Cook. Allen sits in the pocket, picks the defense apart. I don't think they need to lean on his legs. So I'm going to go less than 44.5 rushing yards. I'm going Tank Dell for Houston, more than 39.5 receiving yards. This is going up against Kansas City. I've highlighted they're a little bit less effective against slot receivers than they are against outside receivers. I think Tank Dell's going to have some opportunities. I also think game flow wise, I said earlier, maybe they need to lean on Joe Mixon. Reality is they're probably going to have to throw the ball to win, and they're going to have to create big plays. So Tank Dell, more than 39.5. You might get this on one play. He's got this on one play. That's how I always picture it, Sam. When a guy has a projection under 40, I just picture it's happening second play of the game, play action, get it out of the way. Text Bobby, tell him to make sure that happens. I'm just joking. There's none of that. 39.5 receiving yards for Tank Dell. And then Terry McLaurin, I'm just full Eagles outside corner narrative.
Well, you're
and
buying
the last game, he only had the 10 receiving yards. So I'm going to go Terry McLaurin less than 68.5 receiving yards this week against the Eagles, because Quinyon Mitchell, the corners in Philadelphia, they're going to shut it down on the outside, because that's what they do.
You listened to everybody that last time was like Quinyon Mitchell individually and personally held Terry McLaurin to nothing. Therefore, that's what's going to happen again.
You know me, I'm soft, narrative-driven guy. So a lot of logic with the first two, and then just straight narrative with the third one. First one being, Josh Allen less than 44.5 rushing yards because they're going to blow out the Patriots. Tank Dell more than 39.5 receiving yards because they're going to need to win through the air. And Terry McLaurin less than 68.5 receiving yards because he's going up against Eagles Island and those corners on the outside.
I like it. I can see that. This is my lineup from yesterday. CeeDee Lamb, I just need the one carry because that one carry will get him more than a half rushing yard. Deebo Samuel, I believe that the squeaky wheel will be addressed successfully this week, and he will have more than 46.5 receiving yards. And then Tyreek Hill. There's weird cryptic tweets out there. It just hasn't been going well anyway. Tyreek Hill will have less than 70.5 receiving yards.
So all brought to you by PrizePicks. Shout out to PrizePicks. Appreciate their support for the podcast. Download the PrizePicks app right now. Check the mic is the promo code that gets you $50 instantly when you play $5. The Tyreek Hill tweet, what was it exactly?
Something like, I'm going to go coach now, or I need to, I don't know, something like that. It was a tweet that would change meaning if you put a comma or not in a certain spot.
Right. It needed a comma potentially. It was either like you're talking to the coach or it's like, man, I need to coach.
It was like, I'm going to go coach now, which could, if you put the comma in there, it's like, I'm going to go coach football now, as opposed to I'm going to go now coach / Mike. Let me find it because that doesn't make a ton of sense without.
But yeah, there was one of it. If you put the comma in, it's like he's talking to his coach. If you don't, he's going to coach. It's
time for me to go coach, right? Which if you put a comma after go is it's time for me to go, comma, coach. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's like,
so
I'm out of here.
You're asking for a trade or you're
either saying it's time I got to go coach some football, I'm going to go coach the kids, or you're like, it's time for me to leave, Mike. I'm out of here.
He does have an entire football team that he could coach, but it's another story. All right, let's get to we got a lot more games here, Sam. Let's crank them out. Here we go.
You really want to be the guy talking about volume of children?
Just saying he's got more than me.
He does. He does have a lot more than you. You also have a lot more than other people.
I do. I do not have a team. I almost have a basketball team, not a football team.
That's true.
So we'll do that. Los Angeles Rams at the New York Jets. Jets are, Rams are favored by 3 here in New York. Over-under is 46.5. From our friends over at FanDuel. The Rams are in first place at 8-6. The Jets got their first win in quite a while. They are 4-10. Aaron Rodgers playing pretty good football over these last few weeks. Is this a resurgence? I think to me the most important thing these last few weeks, we tried to see where Aaron Rodgers' head is at here, Sam. That's going to be my favorite part of the offseason.
Yeah.
Go get into Aaron Rodgers' head. What do you think Aaron Rodgers is thinking? Where does he want to play? Does he want to come back? We're going to be predicting that in just a few weeks' time here, Sam.
Well, it sounds like he does want to come back. I don't think that's particularly up for debate anymore. He's kind of said that, right? That he feels like he's.
You don't know what the darkness is going to say this spring. You don't know what the retreat is going to bring to the table.
But wasn't the darkness largely like a product of being uncertain in the first place? Like the darkness is where you go to get clarity when you don't have any. But if he already has clarity, he has no need of the darkness.
Maybe it feels like you might need to refresh your clarity every year, and it might be an annual thing for Aaron.
Maybe it's a one and done type of deal. I don't know.
What are you looking for in this one?
I was just looking. Did Fashanu ever go up against Jared Verse in college? They didn't, right?
No, it would not have been a game. But that was one of the matchups I wrote in my notes, though. Can't wait for that.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Fashanu's been doing pretty well at left tackle for the Jets. Jared Verse has been doing exceptionally well all season for the Rams on the defensive line. Also, just stylistically, that feels like a win for Verse. Like Fashanu, he's one of those guys that always got sort of termed a slightly finesse type of player, which maybe is a little unfair, but he's definitely a sort of technique-based offensive, like pass protecting tackle whereas Verse is just going to try and run through you. Right, like the first time he decides to bull rush Fashanu will be an interesting watch. How good is Fashanu's anchor against that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think the finesse thing with Fashanu is just because his run blocking wasn't up to par compared to his pass blocking. Reminded me of Laramie Tunsil. Like, I don't have issues with Fashanu's anchor and everything. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I think, run game wise, if they have matchups, I think Verse could beat him up. But pass game wise, I think Fashanu could hold his own in this one. The Jets offense, I was critical of them for a while. I think they've been much better in recent weeks. I think it's less of the one-on-one stuff, but when they are just going and winning one-on-one, it's Rodgers and Devontae Adams and Rodgers and Garrett Wilson just making more plays than the defense in recent weeks. So I think that's the way they want to play, and that bodes well. I think they'll have opportunities against this Rams defense.
I mean, they showed it still functions. Like it is capable of doing what everybody thought it was, and Rodgers is capable of playing at that level as well. Like last week, the last few weeks, they've just been like, to hell with it. Let's just start throwing the ball to Adams and Wilson, and that should work. And it does. Like, Adams is still amazing. Wilson is really good. They have playmakers. Like, they should be able to cook, and they have been by and large. It's just too little too late. So I think the Jets can move the ball. I think they can have some success against the Rams defense. And then you get the other side of the ball, which honestly has been all the focus has been on Rodgers and him underwhelming and underachieving. But the Jets defense has been a shadow of its former self. And that honestly might be the single biggest differentiating factor between, like, everyone's doing these, including you, by the way. Everyone's doing these A/B analyses of win percentage, right? Rodgers versus Zach Wilson, as if it's exactly the same scenario, and the only things that have changed have been positive. But there have been negative changes on the defense, which is not even close to the unit it's been the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's because they brought the coach and GM over there, and he probably changed practices, changed everything they're doing. It's all Rodgers' fault. That's how you do it.
Well, they also fired the defensive-minded head coach.
I know. The Jets' defense has not been nearly as good. Rams on the road. Weather says 20-degree weather. I don't think there's any sort of precipitation or anything here, but we've seen both Rams offenses these last couple of weeks. Grind it out, run game where Stafford had a bunch of turnover-worthy plays in the rain last week, and 2 weeks ago, flawless, right? Flawless football from Matthew Stafford, tight window throws, and they're tough to analyze because I don't know what you're going to get. But when they're on every week, I was like, when Stafford's on and Puka Nacua is on and Cooper Kupp, and they're all connected, good luck stopping the Rams. So we'll see which one shows up. I'd love to see a good old-fashioned Rodgers versus Stafford shootout. I think we could see that even in the cold. I also think the Rams have the run game to grind it out against this Jets defense pretty well with Kyren Williams. So I think it'll be a good game. I'm not sure about the Rams favored by 3 here. Remember, the Jets were favored for a lot of games throughout the year, and that's flipped. I don't know if the Rams are even that much better than the Jets overall. They've, Jets have had some breaks go the other way, and Rams have survived their 1-4 start to get to this point to be 8-6 and in first place in the NFC West.
Just to put some numbers to the Jets defense thing, last season, according to PFF, the Jets were the 3rd ranked defense in the NFL in EPA per play behind only Cleveland and Baltimore. This season, they're 19th. So this has gone from legitimately one of the best defenses in the NFL to a below-average unit overall, despite a lot of the personnel being the same, some of it definitely being different, but their star players aren't playing the same. Sauce Gardner has been worse this year. Quinnen Williams has been worse this year. And then they've lost other players. Like, they traded away John Franklin Myers. They let Bryce Huff leave in free agency. The Hassan Reddick thing has been a disaster. I mean, it's not the unit that it was last season. So even with the offense theoretically upgrading in a bunch of areas, it hasn't been enough.
All right, man, let's make some picks. Jets by 3 at home, Sunday at 1. Where are you going with this one?
I'm going with the Rams. There's no way I'm buying into anything the Jets are doing at this point.
Wow. No other reason? You can't say. No comment. Harry's going to take the Rams as well. I'm taking the Jets as underdogs. They've been playing a lot of close games. There'll be another good close game. See what happens. They'll maybe find a way to lose at the end, but they didn't last week. So give me the Jets to cover the 3.
All right.
And like I said, Harry will take the Rams. New England Patriots at the Buffalo Bills. Bills favored by 14.5. It's week 16. It's the first matchup between these two division rivals. Bills have already clinched the division. Bill and Patriots are looking to clinch maybe a top 3 pick here. 11-3 Bills hosting the 3-11 Patriots, first of 2 games in the next 3 weeks between these two teams.
Yeah, 14.5 points. Did you see Gerard Mayo's comments when he was asked about the comparison between Drake May and Josh Allen?
I did not see.
He basically said
Same
something
guy?
like, no, he said something like, look, one of them is the MVP of this league and the other one's a rookie. So there's not really any comparison between the two, which is, on the one hand, kind of fair. On the other hand, it seems a little harsh to your rookie quarterback who is genuinely displaying some Josh Allen-type traits. Like, I think it's okay to say, look, there are flashes of greatness here, but Josh Allen, had to take a giant leap forward between the flashes of greatness and what he is now. Like, it just seemed like an unnecessarily harsh way of dismissing the comparison, given that Drake May is really playing well.
I mean, Mayo's had a lot of questionable statements to the media this year, generally. So, not great. I don't know if he's actually. We talked a lot of Patriots yesterday. We don't need to rehash a ton of it. I am interested to see May cold weather game against a really good team. It'll be an interesting last few weeks. Buffalo twice. We'll see if they're playing for anything in Week 18. Chargers defense in the middle of that. So a tough, December, January stretch here for Drake May as he finishes the season. The Josh Allen, Justin Herbert comparisons that he's gotten. I don't think there's any Josh Allen comparison when it comes to arm talent, strength, velocity, the talent thing that we were talking about yesterday. Like Josh Allen pulls some stuff out that he shouldn't. The thing that's similar to me, though, is how surprising their running ability looked from college to the NFL, right? When Josh Allen started scrambling at the NFL level, it's like, oh, he's a little faster than you thought, a little more powerful than you thought, and has a better feel for it than he showed in college. I'm sensing that with Drake May. Timing of when to run, timing of when to flip it to Pop Douglas for a touchdown in the end zone the other day. I think some of that has been spectacular from a Drake May perspective. And it's not this, oh, he's sneaky fast. I'm talking the feel for when to scramble, when to pick up 30 or 40 yards at a time and being able to do that. That's been really impressive for Drake May. And again, similar to what Josh Allen did early in his career. It's
like a combination of Justin Herbert and Josh Allen, actually. Like he's got the feel part of it from Allen. That I think is right. You're right. Like that's why that play where he flicked it to Douglas for the touchdown through the gap of 2 converging defenders, like that was very Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes like, where they manipulate defenders and then do weird unconventional things with the ball to exploit that. The sneaky athleticism thing I think is very Justin Herbert. Like you watched Herbert's college tape and he was pretty athletic for the Pac-12, but I don't think anyone was really talking about Herbert's going to come into the NFL and be like a genuine dynamic scrambling threat, right? It was like, he's got functional athleticism, which I think was kind of the way people were talking about Drake May. And again, I wonder if this is just like compared with who you come out with, like Jaden Daniels versus Drake May, right? Jaden Daniels is clearly way more dynamic, way more athletic, way more explosive as a runner. And so by comparison, you don't really focus on that as a part of Drake May's game. But I remember like all the way through my notes when I was writing prospect stuff in college is like, he's a lot more athletic than people are giving him credit for. It's not just, like a thing. It's not just like it's functional, it can work. It's like this is like a problem for NFL defenses. And it has been. Like and we're seeing that now that, Herbert has shaken off some of the 17 injuries that he's had. Greg Roman is dialing up runs for Justin Herbert because he is athletic enough to deal with that.
Yeah, and Drake May right now, the highest rushing grades for quarterbacks in the NFL, Josh Allen at 93.8. Drake May at 89.9 per PFF. So number 2 right ahead of Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts. So
and still
smaller sample, but obviously very effective as a scrambler.
And still chasing down that single season yards per attempt record of Michael Vick, which I'm a huge fan of simply because on that chart, you also always get the name Beatty Feathers showing up. And anytime any all-time name from the 30s or whatever shows up in a graphic, I'm all for it. Like, players just had better names and better nicknames in the 1930s and 40s than they do now. It's just a reality.
They really did.
I mean, you always make the joke of tungsten arm, but I was sending you a list of some of the names from the 30s when I was doing research. Some of them were amazing,
Like Cookie Holiday.
Yeah, Buckets. Cookie. There was some guy named Buckets. You'd make a good Buckets. If you'd been a good basketball player, we could have had Buckets Palazzolo. It would have been great.
All he makes is just Buckets guy. Good Buckets guy. Call him Buckets.
Buckets.
The stupid yards per carry thing. We did have, I forget who brought it up. I apologize in advance, but in our stat rant stuff, somebody brought up the QB kneels shouldn't count against quarterbacks. I've seen other people rail against that. I'm willing to take up that mantle and carry that. Like it is absurd. I don't think you should count it negatively. Let's go back and undo all the QB kneels in NFL history.
Every quarterback kneel ever.
Just go through all of them and it's just stupid. They should be a nothing play. Call it team rushing yards, right? You're giving yourself up. It is idiotic to have a guy go 3 carries for 30 yards.
I mean, it's
and
literally,
all of a sudden it's 6 carries for 24. Right. It's just absurd.
It's literally just 3 plays to end the game. Like we should just remove those plays as plays. They should just be somehow eliminated from statistics entirely.
I'll say baseball turned the intentional walk to where you don't have to throw the pitches. You just point, say, here's the walk. If you're at QB, I'm taking 3 kneels.
Yeah, you should just be able to point to the clock and say, we're kneeling this out. Let's wrap the game, and we all walk off the field.
I'm guilty of it because there's not an easy way. Like you have to put some of the tools we have. You put a few extra filters on. I'm guilty of, this guy ran for 11 times for 45, and I'm like in the middle of saying the stat. I'm like, I don't know how many kneels he had. I'm misleading people. Anyway, if you're a Patriots fan and you tuned into this, go to yesterday's show. We talked a lot of Patriots with Ross Tucker. Talked about Drake May, what they have coming up over the next couple of weeks. From a Bills perspective, they got to play these games out, man. The number 1 seed's still on the line. Kansas City has a couple. We'll see what happens with Kansas City Saturday. They still have a couple losable games in Kansas City, so Buffalo has the number 1 seed, on the line every single week here.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll play football.
They will play football.
Will they cover 14.5 though?
I hate when lines get this big because it's just so hard to cover that kind of volume. But I feel like they might. At least the first time they play, I'm gonna say they will. Second time, maybe
Buffalo,
not so much.
In Buffalo, I think we're looking at pretty cold weather, no snow. That's a factor. But I'll take Buffalo to cover it. Harry will as well. They tend to do that at home, hit these big spreads. It'll be an interesting week, though, just from a QB development standpoint, if May can hold his own against a couple of the league's best.
Yeah.
So we're all taking Buffalo. San Francisco 49ers at the Miami Dolphins. Dolphins favored by 1.5 here at home. A couple 6-8 teams, unexpected coming into the season. This looked like a great matchup. At the very beginning of the year, 2 teams that have disappointed a little bit. Dolphins still have their issues playing good teams. I don't know where that puts us here. If it's a team with a losing record, but they're good. Can Miami beat them? And of course, you have the Kyle Shanahan, Mike McDaniel matchup, the former co-workers, of course.
Former co-workers. Yeah, absolutely. And so where does this fit in the Miami narrative scale, right?
So the way I looked at it, I just looked at the end of season record. Was a team 500 or better? And when teams were, they're 15-4 against teams that were 500 or worse, and 2-10 against teams that were above 500. And honestly, if I did 500 or better, it would be 2-11 versus 15-3.
Okay.
And so it's at the end of the season. So if the Niners win, their next 3, or 2 out of the next 3, they're in a different bucket here. So I don't know. I don't know where you put this.
Well, that's the question, right? Does this count as a narrative game because they're both 6-8 teams. So if Miami beats the 49ers at home, is that a team we expect them to beat or not?
If they beat them, then of course they beat them because the Niners can't have a winning record. So obviously that's why that happened. If they lose, then the Niners will probably end up having a winning record. And obviously we knew that was going to happen because the Dolphins can't beat good teams.
Right. So if they win, it definitely plays into the narrative. If they lose, we don't know if it plays into the narrative yet until we see how the 49ers do in their next 2 games. Is that what you're saying?
It's one of the rare times where Miami can control the narrative here. They can control it.
It's like Schrodinger's narrative. We don't know yet whether or not this is actually going to matter with the narrative.
Maybe we didn't highlight it enough last week, or we did in the preview show, but it was Dolphins against the Texans, and we brought up the point that, hey, Bobby Slowick's on one side, Mike McDaniel's on the other side. They're coming out of the same offense, and now you've got back-to-back weeks where the Dolphins are facing their former co-worker here. And maybe that was a part of the reason why Tua struggled so much. And it felt like he was throwing blind into a sea of 7 Texans in the middle of the field on a bunch of plays. Do the Niners have those same answers for the Dolphins offense? Because I'll say of all the offenses, Slowick's Texans offense, they've hit a bit of a lull. I think it's a lot of personnel driven stuff. I think Miami's hit the biggest schematic wall of all of those coaches, where they have a couple staples that they like, and when they're cooking, they're really good. But if you take those away, their offense, looks like night and day.
And remember, for some reason, this entire coaching tree are they more narrative, attached than any other coaching tree? Like, for some reason, every one of these coaches, there's like, oh, they can't, they can't be this coach, they can't be this scheme, they can't play in cold weather, can't be good teams. Like, there's always a narrative attached to every single one of these, like, Shanahan coaching tree people. But one of the many narratives attached to Kyle Shanahan is him against former people that he worked with has always been exceptionally good. Like, when there's a shared history of a scheme, Shanahan appears to get the better of that. Like, remember, anytime he goes up against like the opposing defense, he knows where the weaknesses are. He knows where the bodies are buried. He knows how to exploit it. So if that is a thing, that McDaniel has blind spots in his scheme and just showed them last week, you would imagine Shanahan will be all over that and know exactly where to put people so that they're going to pick off, predetermined Tua passes to a spot over the middle.
I wonder if that is a part of it. It might be. Is probably then the analyst in me says the sample size is too small to lean into that at all.
Right.
I would say the same thing about Shanahan blowing fourth quarter leads, but he does seem to do it at a higher rate. Does do it actually at a higher rate than others. So who the heck knows? It'll be a fun one though. I think it still could be a very good game. Purdy and the Niners offense, I think they're still capable in any given week. You brought up Deebo Samuel. I think is he in your lineup this week? Yeah. Deebo, right? Mm-hmm. The squeaky wheel type of game or bounce back type of game after he was talking a lot last week and struggled. And every week Miami has that ability to overall Tua's had a really good year, spread the ball around. They just haven't been as downfield explosive as they were the first 2 years with McDaniel, using Tyreek Hill and Waddle down the field.
Somebody made the point recently that Purdy's performance essentially since Brandon Ayuk went down has been bad. Like, the 49ers, again, narrative team, the most narrative team in the NFL. Every year there's a different 49er.
Single player fragility. It's a different player that's fragile.
So every year it's like a different player that is the key to this offense functioning, right? Like last year it was Deebo. When you took Deebo out of the lineup, a completely different team. Previously it's been Christian McCaffrey. Now all of a sudden it's Brandon Ayuk. And always there's a confounding factor. Like, there's also when Deebo is down, it always overlaps with Trent Williams as well. Like, maybe Trent Williams is actually the glue that keeps this whole thing together. But Trent Williams not being there at left tackle takes away arguably the best offensive lineman in all of football from an offensive line that's already not great on paper. Trent Williams hasn't played for a while now, and the offense has not been the way we expect it to look. Also, Brandon Ayuk has been down. He's not coming back. Like, those are two of the most important players on this team, and they don't have them.
Yeah, I don't know what you do with that other than they're just all stars, right? I mean, when the Niners lose a player, they lose a star. I mean,
usually,
when Dallas, I'm looking at their depth chart that's up. When Dallas loses Brandon Cooks, it's a loss. Would love to have Brandon Cooks, but he's not a star. So it's a different loss for them versus someone else. You used to call him Tin Cup, man. He used to always make do with whatever he had, but
not anymore.
We see less of that. They do seem more fragile when their stars go down in recent years here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Trent Williams being down is a huge thing for them. Brandon Ayuk, I think they can overcome, but it's a huge loss. I mean, he's a dynamic playmaker that does things differently to anybody else in that offense. McCaffrey down, Isaac Guerrero went into that game last week with a foot injury, came out of it with a hamstring or a knee or something. Like, he's questionable as well. So they just can't get away from being beat up.
The last thing is you have two similar quarterbacks in Brock Purdy and Tua, who you say, oh, well, they're limited physically, but they play this offense better than anyone else. We've seen Purdy elevate this offense more than Garoppolo did. We've seen Tua elevate his offense more than all of his backups did. They don't have the best velocity in the world, but they both play with pretty good anticipation. They play differently from a style standpoint. Purdy's going to do a lot more scrambling and ad-libbing, but there's this perceived cap with what they could bring to the table as well. So there's a lot of similarities in the quarterbacks too. Is Purdy going to get paid? And I think, whatever we learn in these last few games might dictate some of that if he can carry the squad for a couple games here.
I mean, it's pretty interesting because you have almost two exact opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of time to throw in what is functionally a very similar offense, right? Tua gets rid of the ball literally faster than any other quarterback in the NFL. He's averaging 2.31 seconds per throw, per dropback this year, according to PFF. He was leading the league again last year in terms of the fastest. So that'd be 2 straight years where he's been the fastest average time to throw in football. Purdy is over 3 seconds. Like, he is in the Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson scrambling quarterback area of the average time to throw. So that's very unusual, I would say, to have 2 quarterbacks that are effectively running not the same offense, but a very similar, close cousins in terms of offense, at completely opposite ends of the spectrum of something that is a very schematic-driven data point, right? It's a sort of individual style thing as well, but that's a very scheme-influenced statistic, and they're at totally opposite ends of it.
It really is, and it's a whole different discussion. But maybe we overrate the tree stuff, and these guys work together because everything's going to diverge at some point. But there's still some core elements there. So I think it's a really fun matchup. That's why it's only 1.5. Miami being favored this weekend. Where are you going to go with this one?
I am going to go with. I have San Francisco written down. And I don't like it. I'm going to change.
No. Shanahan versus assistants. Go lean into it.
All right, fine. San Francisco. Stick with what I put down.
I'll take San Francisco as well. Harry's taking Miami. So I'm going to say San Francisco is going to end up the season over 500.
And in order to do that, Miami got to win.
Miami can't beat them.
Yeah.
Got to win that. Cleveland Browns at the Cincinnati Bengals. Bengals favored by 7.5. Rest in peace, Jameis Winston, Browns starter. He's still alive.
Yeah.
DTR is getting the start here. Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Bengals by 7.5. They're 6-8. Browns are 3-11. This was an historic game here, Sam. It was flexed from tonight. It used to be a Thursday night football game, but it was flexed to Sunday. First Thursday night flex game in history.
How bad does your game need to be to get flexed out of Thursday night football?
Maybe it was because of press box restrictions that Cincinnati has. They said you don't get this island game.
Like, Thursday night football has had some of the worst games that have ever taken place in the National Football League. And we are saying, no, this one is too bad for us. We got to get something else in here. This is beyond the pale. Al will walk out of the booth if he has to cover this game on Thursday night. We have to go with something else.
Make a story out of Bengals and Browns. I mean, the story is Joe Burrow is having one of the best QB seasons in recent history.
And nobody cares because he's losing.
Along with the 2 MVP candidates, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. But his team is especially bad at playing defense.
The year where the last good year we saw of Deshaun Watson, there was 5 quarterbacks, I think, that had a PFF grade above 90. And they were the 4 guys from the championship games, right? The NFC and the AFC championship game, and Deshaun Watson, who was on a 4-win Houston Texans team that year. That's where Burrow is this year. You're going to get this 2-horse race MVP between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. And then over in the corner somewhere is going to be Joe Burrow with stats that are either equal or slightly better than either of them. And he's going to get 0 votes for MVP.
Joe Burrow up to 36 passing touchdowns, only 8 interceptions on the season, PFF grade of 91.8. The PFF grading at the top here, it's Lamar Jackson 92.2, Joe Burrow 91.8, Josh Allen 91.1. So yeah, the 3 of those guys are all very much in a similar boat. Passer rating of 107.1, just for perspective, from Burrow. So yeah, he's had an outstanding season. The defense has disappointed. They used to have problems with the Browns. I don't know how to predict any of that anymore because that was when the Bengals were good. I think they'll be better than the Browns. And DTR hasn't really been impressive, whether it's been in a relief outing or the, start or 2 that he had last year.
Yeah, he hasn't. He was the guy that looked phenomenal in his first preseason. And everyone was like, it's amazing how fast everyone jumps to rewrite everything they thought about a player. But he looked so good in preseason that people were, again, immediately be like, everyone's wrong. Everyone was wrong about DTR in the draft. You guys screwed it up. You missed the eval. It was here all along. This guy's going to be a star. And then didn't look that way as soon as he saw regular season action. Now, super small sample sizes. The guy's had less than 200 career dropbacks in the regular season. So who knows? Maybe we just had a crappy run. But, it certainly didn't look like he was going to continue that preseason form into the regular season when he's had opportunities to.
Yeah, so he's only dropped back 38 times this year, relief outing against Cincinnati back in week 7. Last year, on his career, he's got a Tim Boyle-like 1 touchdown, 7 picks. So,
yeah, I mean, he has 0 big-time
He was
throws.
impressive. He was impressive in the preseason. And it's not an easy situation to just be thrown in as a backup in the situations that he was. So, somewhat interested to see if he could show any of that preseason ability, but like I said, hasn't yet.
Yeah, 0 big-time throws and 9 turnover-worthy plays in his limited regular season action so far. So certainly, I mean, based off current evidence, there is nothing to say he's an upgrade over Jameis Winston. Nothing. But, current evidence is thin on the ground. Like we a very small sample size, and, we saw some stuff in preseason. So maybe, but certainly nothing at the moment that would make you go, yeah, this is going to be an upgrade.
Yeah, so anyway, that'll be something to keep an eye on. Browns pass rush against Burrow. Burrow's been fantastic under pressure this year, moving around. The Myles Garrett watch is always interesting every single week, and that's all I got on this game.
And I think, okay, it's unfortunate for Nick Chubb getting hurt. I do think that potentially upgrades the Browns because Jerome Ford has been better than Nick Chubb. He's more explosive, more dynamic at the moment. Him getting the full workload probably helps that Browns offense, which in turn could help DTR be able to lean on that a little bit more. So that is an area where the Browns potentially get a little bit better and might be positive for them, even if it unfortunately comes at the expense of another Nick Chubb injury.
We should also highlight the Bengals are not officially eliminated from playoff contention. So they are at, using NFL.com, 5% chance of making the playoffs currently. If they win,
yes. What is the leverage?
7% chance.
Wow.
So they could bump up 2 percentage points. That's considering no other results. They would clearly need the Colts, Dolphins, Chargers. Chargers Broncos will play each other tonight.
Do they now need all? They now need all of the relevant teams that they're going up against to lose out to make this? Is that what we're dealing with?
So there's 3 teams at 6 and 8 who are on the outside looking in right now: the Colts, Dolphins, and the Bengals. The Bengals have the worst odds out of that trio.
But they presumably need Miami, Indianapolis, and one of the wild card teams to lose out for them to get in.
I believe so.
And then the win, obviously.
They're probably rooting for the Chargers to lose. I don't know if it actually matters because they play Denver in one of the games.
Okay.
So that would offset the tiebreaker, but they probably would root for the Chargers to lose, Colts and Dolphins obviously to lose, and then they win out. And that's what.
Yeah, but they're probably at this point down to a scenario where they need, they already need a very specific set of results to go their way.
And you could make an argument that if the 7 seed was the Broncos, Chargers, Bengals, Colts, or Dolphins, that the Bengals are the scariest team just because of what they're able to do from a pass game perspective.
Right, just because of the theoretical potential of that offense.
Yeah, that's it. Anyway, make a pick this weekend. It's 7.5. Cincinnati's favorite at home here.
I'm going to go with the Bengals.
I will as well. We have 6 games to discuss still. But first, going to tell you about our friends over at GameTime. You know how much we love using GameTime to get to games. You could go to the Bengals game this weekend. Just go to GameTime, Sam. You get all the best deals, all the best seats. You could see your seat, all sorts of great stuff. So GameTime picks the easiest way to find the tickets that you need. It filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats. You don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. The curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you're looking for. You can toggle the all-in pricing feature that shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. The seat view that you get in the app is outstanding, so you get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you make the purchase, and they have a lowest price guarantee, or GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. Your purchase is also covered by the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with GameTime. So download the GameTime app, create an account, use code CheckTheMic for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code CheckTheMic, CheckTheMic, for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? Game time.
It's game time, baby.
Game time for the Arizona Cardinals and the Carolina Panthers. The Cardinals are favored by 4.5 in Carolina here. Former number 1 overall picks going head-to-head. I will also not repeat what someone else suggested it is between Bryce Young and Kyler Murray. But it's a battle of 2 quarterbacks.
What did
below
somebody
average
suggest it is?
NFL quarterback height.
Okay, so let me attack that from a slightly different angle. What do you call them? Super fans? The people that are in the chat all the time?
Yeah, you call them super fans. Yeah.
Okay, one of our super fans, quote unquote, the guy Mohall, whose name we still don't know how to say properly, the guy that gave me the ruler to prove ultimately my height, right? Yeah. Makes the point that this might be the first game in NFL history where I am taller than both of the starting quarterbacks.
Wow. I like that. Great perspective.
Right?
Great angle.
I am definitively taller than both of these quarterbacks as an official listed 5'11". Each one of these guys is shorter than 5'11".
What would be a bigger story if I was shorter than the 2 quarterbacks in a game, or you're taller than the 2 quarterbacks in a game? Let us know.
You being shorter is definitely a bigger, like that would involve both starting quarterbacks being 6'11".
That'd be awesome. Dan McGuire was only 6'8".
Right.
But
like
each
Dan one
McGuire
of them,
and Brock Osweiler playing ball.
Yeah, well, I guess theoretically, like this has got to be the combined shortest quarterback game ever, which makes it by definition 1 of 1. You would also need to have 1 of 1. It's just
Cookie, Holiday, and Buckets McGillicuddy were playing against each other in the late 20s.
You would also need to be 1 of 1. It's just that the game is skewing in the other direction at the moment, not upwards.
That's true. It's not easy being this tall. Bad pad level as a running quarterback.
The people in the chat are still acting like we didn't stick me against a measured ruler over on the wall there at the last show of PFF to prove 5'11". It's just not up for debate anymore. It's certified. It's on the wall. I'm gonna put a little mark up there and just write Sam 2024 like a child, right? That's where we got measured. It's official. It's certified. Guinness is going to come in and, document it, give us a little certificate of authenticity, and that's it. It's 5'11". Done.
Then I'll have Harry, Teddy, Benny, and Toby up there next to you, catching up within the next
like
2
11
years.
and 12. They can be ahead.
I don't know who the arbiter of misinformation is, for the podcast or whatever, but we want to debunk any misinformation that you are shorter than 5'11".
Right.
I mean, I don't mind people making fun of you and, jabbing at you a little bit, but let the record show that we set the record straight. You are a legitimate 5'11" as of this past summer.
Let the record show that I'm a legitimate 5'11" and that I am taller than both of these starting quarterbacks this week. That's the only thing that's relevant.
So it's good analysis. You want to get to the picks?
Well, we've got the shortest 2 quarterbacks ever, and then you have the clip that I showed you yesterday of Kyler being informed that it's going to be cold this week. It's going to be like 35 degrees apparently. He didn't seem to love that as an idea.
He did not. That's not that cold. Has he not played in any cold weather games? He plays in the NFC West. He doesn't play he hasn't played in Chicago or anything yet, or what?
To be fair, I think he was joking. It wasn't like he was serious where he's like, oh no, that's going to be a problem.
I know. I think,
but it was still pretty funny. Look, I will walk out of the seat right now.
The weather thing. My favorite weather narrative thing. Like we talk about it with Tua because it's kind of been a thing. Walt calling you out, by the way, saying you're max 5'9".
It's because Walt.
My favorite was
Michael
Vick and the Dome Falcons though going into Lambeau and destroying them with their run game. It was like Vick's big coming out party, like 03 playoffs, whatever it was. I still watch that game every now and again. That was fun because just the narrative. Oh, nobody goes into Lambeau. It's like,
right. That was the game, right? That was nobody had ever won in Lambeau when the temperature was below a certain number, and then Michael Vick goes and does it.
Yes, that was fun. Anyway, general Bryce Young development, fun to watch here. Wasn't great last week. It was his worst game since his return from his benching. Again, still not. We talked about it Monday. Not worrisome, disastrous, but he's got that in his range of outcomes too, so who knows?
Well, that was
3 weeks
a game
to see Bryce Young finish strong this season.
That was a game where they got upset by personnel disadvantages, right? Like Ike Ekwonu blocking Carl Lawson when he was on one, and Micah Parsons was just a complete and total mismatch that the Panthers could not handle. Bryce Young then, added to that by fumbling every time anybody touched him. So I don't think Arizona doesn't have the horses to do that, right? Arizona should not pose one-on-one matchup problems to a guy like Ike Ekwonu or any of the offensive linemen that Carolina is deploying out there. Now, they might be able to scheme up unblocked pressure or generally make things difficult schematically, but they can't bring the kind of personnel advantage that Dallas brought to the table last week. So that should help, right? Like they shouldn't face the same problem as they faced last week.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think on the other side, Arizona's run game has a chance to have success. Just don't really trust Carolina's defense overall.
Yeah.
Their ability to consistently rush the passer, consistently move the ball or stop the run. Maybe Trey McBride touchdown watch will be kind of fun here. But I think it'll be a fun game between the two former number one overall picks. And for the 12th straight week, I will say if Kyler plays special, good luck stopping them.
All right. I'm going to go with the Panthers covering the line, though.
Good.
Because it's cold. Kyler doesn't like that.
We have more really quick 49ers running back news. Schefter says after losing Christian McCaffrey, Jordan Mason, Elijah Mitchell to season-ending injuries, it now looks as if the 49ers will be without Isaac Guerrero this Sunday versus Miami.
There you go.
Who the heck is left?
We got a commenter here saying I'm about 5'7", that he stood next to me at media day. I dwarf
that's
a
a
5'7" person. Dwarf them.
That's a lie.
That's disgusting slander. It really is.
Especially when we've tested this thing.
That's what I'm saying.
This.
It's certified with the measurement ruler. 5'7" is an outrageous slander.
The Panthers are obviously out of the playoff picture. Arizona has an 11% chance currently, 16% chance if they win. So still alive.
They have a similar dynamic to the Bengals, I think, where they need a very specific set of games to break their way for the next 3 weeks for them to get in.
Yes, they do. So where are you going to go with this one?
Carolina.
All right. I will also take Carolina to cover the 4.5. Harry's going to take the Cardinals. Tennessee Titans at the Indianapolis Colts. Colts favored by 3.5 here. They're one of those 6-8 teams still alive in the playoff picture. Titans are out. They're 3-11. They are benching Will Levis. He's done. We got no more use for you, is what Brian Callahan said in no uncertain terms. And Mason Rudolph will be getting the start here against Anthony Richardson. I'd also like to know, did you see the Brian Callahan answer when asked if his team was soft?
I didn't actually watch it. I simply read the captions that described it as fiery, argumentative, and et cetera, et cetera. I didn't actually watch it through. Should I have?
Usually I'm against such captured reading.
Yeah.
But I think it captured, he was not like aggressive. He wasn't, he was just passionate. He was passionately defending his team as not being soft like a football coach would. And I thought it was a fair assessment of his team. They don't play football soft. They're just not that good.
Yeah. I felt like the captioning probably gave me a fair reflection of what the video was, so I just didn't feel the need to watch it.
In that case, I think it did.
Okay, cool. Then no, I didn't watch it, but I got the gist.
No, they're a fine, tough, hard-nosed team. They're just not good at blocking. They're not good at rushing the passer. They're not good at throwing the ball consistently to their own teammates. That's all. It's a talent issue.
Yeah. Do you think so? What impact do you think putting Rudolph in there versus Levis has, if any?
I mean, Rudolph had been playing pretty well. It's just pretty well is the high. He was playing this volatility game, and he'd been creating some big plays, downfield throws. Right, we had a few weeks. They had that 3 or 4 week stretch where he had the most yards on 30+ yard throws.
You mean Levis?
Levis. That's what Levis was bringing to the table.
Right.
Rudolph will not bring that to the table, but he'll bring more effectiveness up to 20 yards, up to 15 yards. So you'll get a little bit more efficiency down to down, staying on schedule, won't take the 5 to 7 sack games, I don't think, that Will Levis was taking. There you go. Protects the offensive line. That's
the difference. So let me read you a few numbers, right? Overall, if that would have been helpful if I hadn't clicked off the thing. Okay. Completion rate this season, 63% for Rudolph, 63.7 for Levis. Yards per attempt, 6.6 to 6.7. Adjusted completion rate, 76.3, 73.8. Passer rating, 81.5, 79.8. PFF grade, 57.8, 56.3. Passing grade, similar area. They're basically the same player with the one difference being the big time throw to turnover worthy play rate is different. So, but they're different and offsetting, I think, in that Rudolph will make fewer big plays, but also fewer meme plays, right? So he has a much lower big time throw rate, less than half, but he also has a much lower turnover worthy play rate than Levis. And then the other difference, and this is the only way I think that it's fundamentally and materially different, is the pressure to sack rate and the overall sack rate. Mason Rudolph's pressure to sack rate is just 10%, which is one of the best figures in the NFL. Will Levis's pressure to sack rate is 31%, which is one of the worst figures in the NFL. So that's the difference, is both of them are fundamentally below average NFL quarterbacks, but Levis is also going to take a bunch of sacks that cripple the offense.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment of where they've been this year. And like I said, when it was happening with Levis, I felt like they were teaching him, hey, don't throw the ball to defense. You're better off taking negative 5-yard play than turning it over. So,
and that's why I think even though they effectively are playing the same, when you put Rudolph in, I think it does feel like the offense is slightly better because they're not burying themselves with the negative sacks, which are forcing further negative, third and long plays, which are just more difficult to crawl out of. That's the difference, I think, it feels like Rudolph creates this slightly better offense because they're simply not shooting themselves in the foot so often by putting themselves behind the chains.
Also, remember last year at this time, Rudolph was the starter for the Steelers and the first guy since Big Ben to actually instill some life into that offense. I don't think it was all him. I think it was, he throws a slant that went for 90 plus yards to George Pickens or whatever, but you had that element with Rudolph. He can at least, run an efficient offense, I think. So other side, Anthony Richardson, he's coming off his worst game since his return, much like Bryce Young. It shows the danger of us overreacting to week, and you just need more information, right? So you had a few week stretch where Anthony Richardson looked better. Last week started off nice against Denver, but just so inconsistent throwing the ball accurately, turnover worthy plays. He's got to play clean. Look, if he just plays clean, man, you got to cut out a few plays for Richardson. And he does bring that running element to the offense that opens it up for Jonathan Taylor when he's carrying the ball through the end zone, opens things up, helps the offensive line. Handful of plays per week, I think, that Richardson needs to clean up.
Yeah, we'll talk about this in the offseason, but his future is going to be fascinating. And he honestly may be the biggest beneficiary of this offseason where it doesn't look like there's going to be a ton of great quarterback options available. Had this been a draft, say like last year, where we're talking 5 or 6 guys in the first round, Richardson could be on the hot seat because I don't know that he's played well enough that you would turn down an opportunity for an upgrade. But now you might be looking at it and going, we don't have an obvious solution to this, so let's give Richardson another year and see what happens. And we are still dealing with microscopic sample sizes overall for Richardson's career. He is so wildly inexperienced overall. Forget in the NFL, in the regular season, just period, playing football quarterback. He has almost no experience still. And he's not playing terribly. It's just that it's wildly inconsistent. It's not consistently good. And we've got this recent history of guys like Josh Allen, right, making a giant leap forward eventually. I don't know if one is ever coming for Richardson, but there's at least you can still talk yourself into the upside of Richardson at this point.
Yeah, I want to try to see what kind of comps there are from a style standpoint. I'm not sure there's any. Statistical comps, big time throw percentage, turnover worthy play percentage, both through the roof, 47% completions. That's not because it drops. That's adjusted completion percentage being under 60, which is bad.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of comps for that historically, plus the rushing component. Because then it's like, all right, so then what needs to get better to handle some of that volatility that he brings to the table? It'll be an interesting offseason discussion for sure. Did you have something?
No, you're right. He's a very unusual quarterback, which makes sense for a guy that was historical outlier in terms of experience and athletically, literally being the most athletic quarterback to ever enter the game, according to, relative athletic score. It makes sense for him to be a very unique statistical outlier overall, right? I maybe the closest thing to him is Cam Newton, who eventually put it together for an MVP type of season. But Cam Newton's the closest thing I can think of to a guy that was incredibly dominant as a rushing threat, very inaccurate in broad terms, like had multiple seasons with completion rates in the 50s, right? Never got down to 40s, but had multiple years where his completion rate was well below or was below 60%. And then eventually did put it all and had a fairly volatile big time throw rate to turnover worthy play type of in any given season. And then eventually did put it together with that MVP season in 2015. That's the closest thing I can think of to a comp, but even that's not great.
Yeah, it probably is, but yeah, Cam was a better player. Cam's baseline was better as a starting point than Richardson. Last thing, I just want to see Laiatu Latu rushing the passer against fellow first rounder JC Latham from just a matchup perspective. I think that's an interesting watch for a game that most people will care less about here in week 16. Colts still have a chance to make the playoffs. They have an 11% chance as of right now per NFL.com. With a win, they move up to 18%. So much like the Bengals, the Dolphins need to win and get some help. Colts by 3.5 here at home. Where are you going with this one?
Yeah, as we said earlier, there is a scenario where the entire AFC can basically be locked in playoff-wise after this weekend if results go the right way. I am going with the Titans.
Titans, huh?
Yeah.
Harry's going to take the Colts. I'll go with you, man. I'll take the Titans.
To cover the 3.5.
Mason, like we said last year, let's repackage the Rudolph on Christmas weekend joke, right? You got to go with it. Rudolph on Christmas weekend, gonna cover.
Always.
We talked a lot about this game yesterday. New York Giants at the Atlanta Falcons. Falcons favored by 7.5. This game started as a double-digit spread, at least in the Sleeper app. So you might get a different spread if you're doing it in Sleeper. That was before we knew Kirk Cousins was being benched for Michael Penix Jr. I would not read into that line too much. There's just uncertainty with a rookie quarterback.
I mean, yeah, read into it a little bit. That is suggesting that Vegas is at least hedging multiple points, thinking because this move is essentially an indication that the Falcons believe that Michael Penix Jr. gives them a better chance of rescuing the season and making the postseason, effectively winning out, than Kirk Cousins does, right? This at least suggests that Vegas does not agree yet.
Yeah, but there's a hedge to make money.
Right.
Which is not exactly one-to-one with, Kirk Cousins is worth 4 points compared to Michael Penix Jr. You stupid Falcons. What are you doing making this move?
Sure.
It's just uncertain. It's an uncertainty hedge. But we broke down the reasons behind this a lot. So, again, if you're a Falcons fan tuning into this, check out yesterday's show. We talked a lot about the mechanics of the move, the why, the move back in March and in April when they signed Cousins, when they drafted Michael Penix Jr. But the bottom line is, they've got some dudes to throw to. Cousins wasn't getting them the ball effectively enough, was turning the ball over too much. Michael Penix Jr.'s opportunity now to open up the offense, maybe run more play action, move him around a little bit. Remember, by the way, he ran like a 4.6 or whatever, never runs, but he's actually athletic and he has the arm strength to just reach parts of the field that Kirk Cousins was not consistently throwing.
Not a 4. Yeah, he got into the 4.5s. I think.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, it
was crazy.
I remember when we were doing the show last year, and Trevor was coming on Tuesdays to talk draft stuff, and we did the quarterbacks, and one of the quarterbacks was Michael Penix Jr. And I put down on my notes this guy can run, and Trev talked to me like I was an idiot because he's got didn't ever do it, right? There was zero rushing essentially in his college tape. He just wasn't a part of his game, but he has that athleticism. He can legitimately move if he wants to. It's just he didn't ever want to, in part maybe because of the knee injuries and whatever. But I do think that could be a bigger part of his game in the NFL than it was in college, and may have to if he's standard rookie, needs a little bit more time. He's going to have to buy himself a bit more time with his athleticism. And certainly relative to current Kirk Cousins, it's a huge upgrade. He's got the capacity to get away from plays that Cousins simply doesn't have anymore.
Yeah, the other element is the majority of the Falcons' run game is wide zone type of stuff, even if it's a pitch play. They're trying to get running backs out wide on the edge. Kirk Cousins can barely move. You can't run a whole lot of boot action off of that. Even just running boot action with Penix Jr. maybe opens things up a little bit.
He certainly has an easier time of making it to the wide zone mesh point than Cousins has right now. And then, as you said, once he's eventually gotten the ball to the running back, can also pivot back around and at least threaten the boot action.
Yeah, and look, I'm just viewing this as like I don't know if Michael Penix Jr. is a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins right now today, but much like the Jameis Winston situation, there's a level of upside and volatility here that the Falcons might be leaning into. And I say that they're benching a guy that had 9 picks in 5 games and 1 touchdown pass, right? So it's not like it's going to be more volatile than that. But again, you might have more big play opportunities.
That's the thing, I think, is that what they're banking on is Kirk Cousins right now leads the league in turnover-worthy plays. He is tied for third in turnover-worthy play percentage per PFF. They're effectively saying there's no way that Penix can be worse than that, like on the bad end. There's no way he can make a higher volume of mistakes than Cousins is currently making on the season. And the chances are he can bring some more positivity to the table with that added athleticism, with his ability, with his arm, right? He's got an unquestionably good arm as opposed to Cousins, which his arm comes and goes. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. It's platform based. It's, scheme. It's a specific route concept based. Like sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. Penix is almost certainly going to be better in both those areas, and he can't really be worse in terms of volume of turnover-worthy plays. So it has to net in a positive direction, I think, is the analysis that they're running right now. And it's absent seeing him yet, it's hard to disagree with that as an assessment.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing him. I mean, I really think his arm strength is fantastic. Can't help but picture him throwing tight window, back shoulder, zip throws to Rome Odunze last year at Washington. I think, he'll have the ability to drive the ball outside the numbers, create some big plays for Atlanta. New York, the Giants have just looked awful in recent weeks, offensively, defensively. No Dexter Lawrence. They weren't bad even when they had him. So they're just depleted and playing the string out at this point.
Right. Nothing to play for. Nobody's fighting for anything. They're basically checked out in the season.
And the Falcons they still have a 31% chance of making the playoffs. That bumps up to 39%. We'll need some help, obviously, with that number, but they have to pretty much win out here. And as we mentioned on yesterday's show, interesting that they're making this move during a playoff push. Let's go with the unproven rookie. So can't wait to see it.
The other move they're making is they might make some kicks now that Younghoe Koo has been put on IR, who was one of these guys, historically very good kicker, who suddenly had forgotten how to kick this year. Now they're forced into making a move, so they might actually have the kicking game might come back. They might be able to make some 50-yard kicks.
But it hurts their onside kick game because he's the master of the hypnotizer.
Yeah.
So 7.5 is the spread as of right now. Like I said, in Sleeper, it'll be different, but let's go with 7.5 on the show. Who are you taking?
Going with the Falcons. So I might need to go and change my Sleeper pick to take advantage of that.
Go check it out. I think I saw it at 11. Actually, is it 8.5 now? Seeing it at 8.5 on the screen here, and I trust Ben. I'll still take Atlanta.
8.5, I'll take Atlanta, but I might take advantage of the Sleeper app and go back the other way. Who knows?
Harry, do you want to come make a pick really quick? Harry just walked in. Well, I'm going to tell everybody about PFF. Do you have any take on Falcons Giants? Don't get nervous here. Who you taking? Falcons or Giants? By 8.5. What?
I see.
Oh no! You picked the Falcons.
Yeah,
All
Falcons.
Right. Yeah, you don't have time to look it up.
All
right, man. Good
Perfect.
Work. We got to work on your camera presence, though. All right, PFF has you covered all season long with the best data, tools, and analysis in the game. Sign up for PFF Plus today to unlock all their famous player grades and premium stats. Push to the playoffs in your fantasy league with the in-season tools and award-winning rankings from fantasy expert Nathan Yaki, and stay connected to the next generation of talent with the best NFL draft coverage on the planet. No matter what you're looking for, PFF Plus has what you need to make winning decisions. Visit PFF.com and sign up today for less than $10 per month. PFF Plus, powering winning decisions. And, we've cited PFF quite a bit on the show already. I think the grades are still fantastic, informative, and useful, whether you are a fantasy player or just a hardcore fan. So go check it out, PFF Plus, over at PFF.com. 3 more games.
3 more.
Saints at, what's that?
3 more.
3 more, yeah. Saints at Packers. Packers by 14.5. It's Monday Night Football, Christmas Eve game, December 23rd night. 14.5.
Christmas
Thoughts on this
Eve.
game, Sam?
Are we back to Spencer Rattler at quarterback after the Jake Hayner experiment was failed?
I would assume so. Haven't gotten a report here. Green Bay clinches a playoff berth with a win or a tie. Also some other scenarios as well, but winning, you're in to the playoffs for Green Bay here.
Yeah, I very much poo-pooed the idea of Toyotathon Jordan Love the other week. I don't know if I'm quite buying into that yet, but he certainly has ticked up the last couple of weeks and it's starting to look very much more like Jordan Love from late last year than he was. Like I think it might not quite coincide with Toyotathon, but certainly now it's starting to look like he's there.
I mean, next year, fast forward to next year at this time, Thanksgiving hits. I'm going to say, hey, Jordan Love, this is when he starts to get hot. Thanksgiving. It's just easy analysis.
I mean, 3 straight games with 0 turnover-worthy plays. Like, that's significant.
Yeah.
I mean, those are 3 of the 4 games he's had this year without a turnover-worthy play. 3 of them have come in the last 3 games.
And I think he just has an interesting game, Sam. I think he'll still miss, he missed a wide-open crosser the other day. He'll miss some throws. He'll just be off every now and again, but he still has the special in him. We've seen some of those the last couple of weeks, good touch down the field. And I think overall they have relied on him less this year to carry the team. And it's been more of a Josh Jacobs run-first attack. But I just think Green Bay has multiple ways to win. I like that. Peaking at the right time once again this year, just like they did last year. Every year we say, hey, does that matter? Does momentum or how well you're playing matter going into the playoffs? Historically, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Last year, it really did. The Eagles looked like the worst team in the league, and they played like that in the playoffs. The Packers were a top 4 team in the league. They kind of took it to the Cowboys and almost beat the Niners on the way to the NFC Championship. So they're peaking at the right time again, and that's why it's 14.5 here against the Saints.
I mean, look, last week was incredibly impressive. They went into Seattle, destroyed them, looked like a much better team. The week before that, they took it to the Lions and, was a really close game against the team that was at the time and still is, right? Are they still in the number 1 seed currently, albeit tied now? They've shown that they're at that kind of level. Like, everyone's been putting the Lions and the Eagles on this collision course for the NFC Championship game. All of a sudden, Minnesota is still alive for that 1 seed, and Green Bay, even though they're third in their own division, look like they can go toe-to-toe with any of those teams. So I think this is legit. Like, Green Bay, again, looks like they are peaking for the perfect time of the season and looking like one of the most formidable teams in the NFL.
They're currently the number 6 seed in the NFC, according to this. Still a lot to play for, obviously. Playing extremely well. Got to highlight Edgerrin Cooper, who was awesome as a rookie linebacker, ready for him to take on more of a role. He's an explosive blitzer, made a couple plays in coverage last week. I think Cooper also just continues to sum up what the Packers do, replenishing with young players on both sides of the ball. And they've done a fantastic job of that these last couple of years.
Are Green Bay, there's no scenario where they can get the 1 seed, right? They're mathematically out of that.
I mean,
because technically they're only 2 games back, but surely there's no possible, because Green Bay, no, they can't, because the Vikings and the Lions have to play each other. So,
yeah, it would involve something absolutely insane.
I don't think they can, because they're 2 games back, but one of those teams has to get a win.
But they could get the division. No, they wouldn't be able to.
They can't get so they can't.
You can't even get any of it
because they're 2.5 games back essentially with 2 games left to play.
Yeah. There might be a point where they're just locked in and resting people, right?
I mean, they're kind of locked in now, right? Didn't they? They're almost certain.
No, but I mean, like the seed is completely locked in too, and there's no change.
Yeah,
because they could overtake
the 5 seed,
Minnesota for the 5 probably. Right.
Yeah, but they're very close, I think, to having nothing to play for at all.
Yeah. So, anyway, Christmas Eve. Anything else you want to add in this game before we make a pick?
Not really. I mean, there's a 14.5-point spread for a reason. I think the Saints offense certainly has more danger and dynamism to it with Spencer Rattler at quarterback, even if he's also shown the capacity to play very rookie-like football. Whereas Green Bay looks like they're peaking at the right time on both sides of the ball. You would think that they have way too much for the Saints, and then maybe Spencer Rattler can make a few plays and keep it closer than that. But this should be
MVS revenge game.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking at here.
All right.
All right, make some picks.
14
and a half.
Green Bay are covering more than 2 touchdowns.
I think I'm taking New Orleans just because it's so many points, and I don't think they're not like a train wreck of a team. So I'll take the Saints to cover the 14 and a half on the road. Harry's going to take Green Bay here. All right, 2 more. Jacksonville Jaguars at the Las Vegas Raiders. It's 4:25 on Sunday. Raiders favored by 1.5 here. Mac Jones, Desmond Ridder back again.
Is this the saddest game of the year?
It's up there.
You're just looking at it, you're like
2-12 versus 3-11. A lot of number first round pick implications here.
Like if this game didn't appear on the television and you were just handed a brief summary of what happened afterwards, would you be sad that you missed it?
I mean, I'm a weirdo that likes to watch every NFL game, and if this was an island game, I would lock in and watch.
Like if this was
I would watch like Josh Hines Allen and Colton Miller play,
like if
one-on-one.
If this was a Thursday night island game, can you imagine how mad Al Michaels would get at it?
That's a fun game, actually. It was which game would Al be most mad at every single week if this was his game?
Al would be disgusted at this game.
In the power rankings this week, it's this number 1, and then the Browns Bengals flexed out game.
Yeah, he would be utterly disgusted if he had to sit through this.
So I'm going to watch Josh Hines Allen and Colton Miller one-on-one in a good matchup.
Okay, that makes sense. That's about all there is to watching this game.
Is Aiden O'Connell back for this?
Maybe. I mean, he was talking about trying to gut it through last week, and he might try and do it again, but who knows? They're another team. Again, they're not motivated to put the best team out there necessarily right now.
No, they're not. Vegas is currently in line for the number 1 overall pick. They're the one of 2 teams at 2-12. It's the Raiders and the Giants. The Jaguars are one of 5 teams that are 3-11, and technically right now the Jags would have the number 4 overall pick in the draft behind only the Patriots as far as 3-11 teams go. So there's, for the Jags, there's Travis Hunter implications here, whichever route they want to go, receiver, whatever it might be in the draft, top defensive player. So there's implications there. And then for the Raiders, of course, future QB implications here.
We always thought teams don't really tank in the NFL, except when they do, right at the end of the season. Like, remember when Philadelphia effectively pulled the starters from that game to ensure they lost and got a better draft pick, which actually, that the dominoes meme where it starts off with a tiny domino and at the end there's a giant slab that it's knocking over. Like, you can trace a lot of the Philadelphia stuff back to that one move in terms of draft position. This would be a really damaging win from the Raiders' point of view, from a roster construction, team building standpoint. Like, they're currently in line for that number 1 pick in a year where there might only be 2 quarterbacks available that anybody cares about. And even then, you might internally only like one of those guys. This would be a potentially very bad game to win because of what it could do to you.
It would be. So I would not put Aiden O'Connell. Aiden O'Connell is like that tank-proof kind of guy. He's going to have too many good games in there. Too many good games.
I mean, I don't know if he's tank-proof, but he's certainly
not proof. But yeah,
he's certainly very dangerous to your tank and your tank plan. Like, and because remember, the Eagles started that game with a different quarterback, and then they specifically pulled out the guy. Was it Minshew? They specifically pulled out the quarterback that had more chance of winning because they're like, dude, we're getting
Nate Sudfeld came in throwing screens.
Right. It's like we are in serious danger of winning this game. Get that guy out of the lineup.
Yeah. Anyway, make a pick here.
I'm going with the Jags.
I'll also take the Jags. It's also a matchup of the 2 first-round edges that I trash the most, Trayvon Walker and Tyree Wilson. See, there's stuff to watch in this game.
The Trayvon Walker hive remains strong, they remain committed, and they remain convinced that he is, in fact, good.
So that game's in Vegas, and we're going to be in Vegas in just a few weeks for Week 18. That's Friday, January 3rd. We're going to be over at Circa, our friends over at Circa Resort and Casino, one of the premier destinations for all sports fans in Las Vegas. We'll be there for the finale of the regular season that weekend, broadcasting from Circa, checking out Stadium Swim, which is the very best place to watch games, and, of course, the Legacy Club, which includes some of the best views of the fabulous Las Vegas Strip. So it's Week 18. We're there that Friday, the 3rd. We do a little meet and greet that night over at Circa. Then we're going to hang out throughout the weekend, watch the games, 2 NFL games on Saturday, and then the other 14 NFL games on that Sunday. Cannot think of a better place to watch 14 games across 12 hours or whatever it is than at Circa.
Absolutely. If you are, I know we have some listeners in Vegas. We've had those people contact us before. If you're within distance to Vegas or you simply want to get there, I think that place is going to be absolutely awesome to experience an NFL weekend from at that sports book. The giant screens, multiple screens, the whole thing is going to be sweet. So come for the meetup and hang around and experience the whole NFL slate with us.
All right, so here's what you got to do. In the YouTube description, there's a link. It's circalasvegas.com/huddle up at overhang. So you're going to click on that link, and then there's multiple options. You're going to choose the Los Angeles weekend. It's called the Los Angeles weekend because the Los Angeles Chargers are in town playing the Raiders. So choose that weekend and sign up right now. circalasvegas.com/huddle up at overhang. We'll see you guys out there. Week 18. All right, let's wrap it up with tonight's game. Thursday Night Football, Denver Broncos at the Los Angeles Chargers. Got to get our game face back on here. This one does count. It matters. It was flexed in. The very first game in NFL history to be flexed into Thursday Night Football. 9-5 Broncos at the 8-6 Chargers. Over under just 41.5 from our friends over at FanDuel.
Do we think that was specifically at the request of Al? Like Amazon
to go to LA? It's like,
no, just the
what are your options? LA only.
Amazon didn't really care about the games, but Al specifically requested that this game get flexed in. Like I need this
home,
game
too. He's like to his you know that's in his rider, like one flexed in LA game or something. So
late in the year when you're trying to make me go to a cold eastern environment, I in fact instead want to flex in a Los Angeles game at home, so I barely need to leave my house.
That's the real flex is not the game. It's Al Michaels flexing and going from 20-degree weather in Cincinnati on a Thursday night to home dome game in Los Angeles. Just, man, what a legend Al Michaels is. It's now going to be like steak number 6,748 from his favorite steakhouse. I'm just happy for Al.
From that table by the window, right? Al is flexing out of regional Ohio into Los Angeles next to his house so he can have his steak in the window that he always eats from.
It's a fun matchup, though, Sam. Really is. I mean, the Broncos have just overtaken the Chargers for the number 6 seed. So they're game up, obviously, in the AFC West standings and in the wild card standings. The Broncos will get over 99% probability to get into the playoffs with a win. Chargers get to 97% playoff probability with a win of their own. So just a huge high leverage game to watch tonight.
Yeah, one of the few high leverage games that still exists, really. But this is fascinating because last week, I think, was massively, like usually we reach this point in the season, you're like, generally speaking, we know what these teams are, how good they are. You've got a pretty good handle on what is happening in big picture terms. But last week, I mean, the Chargers got absolutely stomped by the Bucs, who we would have expected to do a good job against. And then Rookie of the Year, Bo Nix, his candidacy just hit a brick wall last week where they needed an incredible moment of stupidity by Jonathan Taylor to fumble that game away effectively and swing it massively back in their favor. Bo Nix had a nightmare of a performance and it didn't matter. They were able to get the win. But now you're like, how much of last week is relevant? Is Bo Nix that volatile or vulnerable to these swings? Or does he go back to an extremely efficient, well-operating quarterback? And then do the Chargers simply not have the horses on offense, absent J.K. Dobbins anymore, to function? And is a different quarterback able to do to their defense what Baker Mayfield was? Like, I think this is a really interesting game because of how much last week threw a wrench in the workings of both teams.
For both teams, right? I mean, it is true. I mean, the Chargers got worked. I mean, going into last week, the Chargers had the lowest points per game allowed defensively.
The number one
now
defense.
They're tied with Denver, right? So now it's a 1-2 between the Broncos and the Chargers. So the two best defenses in the NFL just from a points per game allowed perspective. It was uncharacteristic last week. I would also say we spend a lot of time talking about the quarterbacks, but it's not just who's good, who's not. It's the how they get there and the construction of their play. If I told you earlier in the year, hey, Justin Herbert's going to get the big-time throw rate back up there to 6.3%, which is really high, third highest in the NFL. And he's going to keep the turnover-worthy play rate down. And that's going to show up in the actual only 2 picks all season against 16 touchdowns. Wow, pretty impressive. But the fact that the Chargers are still so inconsistent offensively, I think goes to show, I think, the inconsistency of their run game, maybe missing out on J.K. Dobbins and some of those big plays. But I think really it's the consistency of the pass catchers that Herbert's throwing to.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing. I think, we talked about this either coming out or last game or last week sometime. I think this offense in particular is hugely vulnerable without J.K. Dobbins. I think they need a good running back in this offense, and without him, they just don't have one. So now you're putting all the onus back on Justin Herbert to carry the thing, and as you said, that's when the vulnerabilities show up of look who he's throwing to. Even if he's playing out of his mind, he can't necessarily make it all happen. Those guys got to make plays as well. And against Denver, you're going up against maybe the best pass rushing team in the NFL. One of them, certainly they have one of the top pressure rates in all of football. Like, you're making this without a running back, without J.K. Dobbins. This is now a one-dimensional offense in the dimension they don't want to be in. And you're pairing that up against one of the best pass rushing teams in the NFL. I don't think that they're going to have Riley Moss back yet, the number 2 corner, the guy opposite Patrick Surtain. But he's getting closer to being back. But all the things are sort of tilting against the Chargers on that side of the ball.
Surtain was a full participant, left the game with an ankle injury on Sunday, so he did play. He did at least practice leading up to this game this week. Gotta fix a helmet.
Yeah.
There you go, Tobes.
Perfect.
So I thought the Surtain thing could be an issue. Remember, he got hurt one of the last plays of the game on Sunday, but he should be back and ready to go. So I'm looking forward to this. My boy Nick Bonito tearing it up recently. Him and Rashawn Slater, going head to head on that side more often than not. That's a great matchup. I think just that matchup in general, Denver's defensive front, all of the different players that they have with 30, 40 pressures plus, their ability to get pressure on Herbert, and then I think some Herbert consistency. I mean, Bo Nix consistency too to bounce back from last week, but Herbert's had those games, right? He's had those halves of football where he looks like the best QB in the NFL, another half where he's a little, struggling a little bit. We've seen that inconsistency quite a bit from him over these last couple of weeks. So can he put together a full game with not the season on the line, but the winning team is almost assured of a playoff spot. So there's a lot to play for here.
And can the Chargers defense bounce back from getting just lit up by the Buccaneers, right? They got stomped in every facet of the game. Baker Mayfield, receivers, passing game, running game. I mean, they got absolutely done over by the Bucs. Can they bounce back against a rookie quarterback, albeit one that up until last week was playing really well?
All right, man. I can't wait for this one. I think it's going to be great. AFC West, AFC implications as far as the wild card goes. Chargers favored by 2.5, so it's it's pretty close. Vegas has it close. 2.5 here. Where are you going to go with this one?
I'm going to go with Denver. I think that last week their performance was more of an aberration, whereas I think the Chargers' performance might be indicative of problems that don't get fixed. Like they're not getting J.K. Dobbins back this week.
I mean, if the Chargers fall to 8-7 and they're on the verge of maybe dropping out of the playoffs, the whole Harbaugh narrative thing, he turned this team around and everything, I mean, loses a little bit of luster if the Chargers collapse down the stretch. Because that's the stuff Brandon Staley got trashed for. Collapses and underachieving and everything.
It's still kind of where they were supposed to be, though. I mean, even if
it is, yeah.
Like, I think it would be pretty harsh to be like, that was a failed first year for Harbaugh if he just missed out in the postseason.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to take the Chargers. Harry's going to take the Broncos. My son and I differ on about 80% of the games, I would say at quick glance. So it's big week. I'm calling this moving week for me back in the standings.
You're either going to be right back rivaling the 9-year-old, or you're going to be dead and buried.
Yes. No in between.
No in between.
Looking forward to it. So full slate starts Saturday. Well, starts tonight, Saturday, and then into Sunday. We'll be here tonight reacting to Chargers Broncos. So, of course, if you're on YouTube, make sure you're here. Hit subscribe, hit the thumbs up, and all that fun stuff. And anything else, Sam? We ready to go?
Yep, I think we're out of here. Remember, next week we are doing the normal Monday show. Then there are games on Wednesday, so we won't be doing our Wednesday show. It's also Christmas.
It is.
So we won't be doing our Wednesday show, but we'll be combining effectively, squeezing both shows into one. And on Thursday, we'll have a big show.
Perfect. Big show next Thursday. All right. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again Monday morning with our Week 16 NFL review.